So do pop into the tent at stand 305. Our live stream is 12 to 4 today. Stay tuned, we've loads to come.
To all those on the live stream of Agriland, I just hope that the sun has come out now and there's a nice breeze and the ploughing has been opened, and I hope all of you in your lives and in your work and in your families have both an enjoyable plough and a very, very healthy year to come, and good luck with all the issues that are being debated and thrashed out as they should be in rural Ireland.
Welcome back to the Agriland Pavilion. I'm back inside and we're about to start our live stream and our first panel discussion in association with UPMC. I'm joined on our panel today by MEP Billy Kelleher, MEP Grace O'Sullivan and Deputy Carol Noel. Thank you all for joining me today. Billy, I might go to you first and we'll jump straight in, Billy. We've spoken a lot on this panel and on the live stream here on Agriland about the European decision in recent days in relation to the nitrates derogation. Obviously, Ireland has a derogation. We always knew that it was going to be reduced from 250 kilos to 220 of organic nitrogen per hectare. That seems to be not for moving. The European Commission has basically said it will go down to the 220. We have to protect water quality. And what, as a result, though, can Europe offer to Irish farmers who will be affected by derogation in terms of mitigating measures?
Yeah, well, I was disappointed that actually they decided to go to 220. The reason being I just didn't think that they gave enough time for the mitigating measures that we've put in place over the last number of years to impact on water quality and the assessment of our rivers and our water basins. Just didn't have enough data in the last number of years to make, I believe, a scientific assessment of the trends, bearing in mind we were only assessing 2021 and 2022. I would have liked if we had more time. That is not the case, so we're now in a situation where we're going to 220. I mean, we need to address some immediate issues from the 1st of January. Farmers have three choices, and they're not nice choices, but I certainly think the issue of slurry exporting will have to be looked at. There'll have to be measures put in place to support farmers to be able to transfer slurry from their farms to farms that are not in derogation. And that's easier said than done, because in some areas most of the farms will be in derogation, so they'll have to transport slurry for long distances. But I think that that's an area that the Irish Government, the Department of Agriculture, Teagasc and the European Union will have to look at to see how they can facilitate the exporting of slurry out of high derogation farms to farms that are not in derogation at the moment. That's one area we have to do immediately. I'll
come back to that in a moment. Carol, another aspect of European decision-making that will have a major impact on farmers here in Ireland is the nature restoration law. So what are farmers saying to you about the re-wetting element of that particular legislation?
Well, look, farmers are extremely frustrated, extremely disillusioned, and, you can't blame them. I mean, Laois Offaly farmers, no different to any other part of the country, they would have dredged that land would have been reclaimed in the past by their families. And now they're told that, look, up to 30% of this land is going to be used by the end of the decade. I did hold a cross-party briefing in the Dáil on this very issue a few months ago, and I want to commend indeed the TDs and senators of all parties who attended and who contributed. But there is huge concern, and look, you have to work with farmers. It's very unfair. There's so much talk about mental health and everything else, but look at the strain that that's putting on farming families. Yeah. They don't need this. It's a threat to farm ownership as well.
Grace O'Sullivan, you're a Green Party MEP. There's an understanding out there among farmers that we do need to protect nature and we do need to protect our heritage and special areas and definitely biodiversity and improve water quality. So how can farmers be supported to do this? If this is, this is what the European Commission is saying we must do, are farmers just being left to their own devices and told to do it, or how can they be supported?
Yeah, it's really important that farmers are supported. There's various schemes out there, but I think it's like the European Union has, the reason it's put different schemes in place is because we have such a challenge in terms of climate change and water quality and that. So it's, for the Greens, you know, it's about a just and a fair transition. As we move to decarbonise. And because of that, we have to make sure that farms, but different types of farm families are brought along with us all the way. You know, so it just makes full sense the farmers are supported. But I suppose, you know, we're talking about derogation and that. I think the conversation with farming communities is really important. Like there are the farm agencies and the farm representative bodies, but I think, you know, listening to farmers here over the last day or so and listening to them when I'm in the constituency, I hear more and more that farmers feel that there's not enough communication and engagement with farmers in order to, so that one, they know the schemes, but also that they have the information well in advance. So for instance, in terms of the nitrogen derogation, like we know that the European Union has a directive and it had set 170 kilos of nitrogen per hectare. But, you know, we knew that was the pathway. So I think that there's been a lack of communication with the farmers to prepare them. So we should have been better prepared for
But I have to say, is it just an Irish thing where, you know, a lot of people have sat on this panel and say there wasn't communication. I mean, I think the dogs on the street knew that climate change was going to have to come and we were going to have to meet these nitrates derogation. Was it an Irish thing to say, sure, we'll put it to the end, we'll keep pushing it out? Billy Kelleher, like, what would you say? Because people are saying now, oh, farmers have been brought to a cliff edge, but we all knew this derogation was coming. Charlie McConnell, you know, the Minister for Agriculture, Fianna Fáil Minister for Agriculture, is saying, you know, the European Commission has said what it said, there's no flexibility there. Maybe the Taoiseach, who's Fine Gael, is saying, we'll invite the Commissioner over. Is that supposed to have a different outcome? I don't know what's going on at the moment in terms of politics. Yeah, well, look, a lot of us have invited commissioners over to look at the farming practices in Ireland and how we farm and how it differs from the European model where, you know, cows are housed for longer periods of time, we're pasture-based. But farmers respond to policy directives. And for years, once quotas were lifted, we asked farmers, by policy set by governments of all hues and colours, to respond by increasing production. They went out, they invested in their farms, they increased their stock, they increased the output, and they did it very efficiently. And now they're being penalised for doing that, the response to policy decisions of governments. So I think policy changed based on education and new information and new science, I suppose. But it is unfair then on farmers then to just immediately ask them to turn off the switch. And that's why the derogation, yes, there was always the potential cliff edge which has arrived, but you know, for a period of time we were trying to renegotiate. There was a water quality review that came up with the answer it came up with, you know. But you're always hoping that, you know, with a little bit of flexibility, with a bit of leeway, we could have moved farmers in the direction they have to go, but not with the blunt instrument of the 1st of January 2024 reducing from 250 to 220. That will cause significant problems. There's no point in saying otherwise. Carol Nolan, as a TD here, will say on the ground in Ireland, the Minister for Agriculture went to try and get some flexibility, but it just wasn't forthcoming. You know, in the message back was that we were lucky to have a derogation at all. Like we look at other countries, we're one of the few that do. What would you suggest can be done now at this stage?
I don't think we should accept this. I think that we need to
I don't think we have a choice, as the Commission has said.
But I think what we need to do, or at least try first before we accept anything, is to unify as politicians and meet the Commissioner. Because, look, I saw myself at a cross-party briefing on re-wetting that you can get unity and collaboration. That's the first thing you need. Unity among politicians and calling on the Commissioner, but also showing him that there are other things that need to be taken into consideration, such as, like, there's technical tables under review in terms of the level of slurry, slurry storage, and that will more than likely throw out that there's a need for additional slurry storage during the closed period. Now, if farmers were supported financially, that could be one way that we can try and, help mitigate, and help play our part. But farmers want to play their part, and farmers are playing their part. Because if you look at the machinery that farmers have had to buy in terms of slurry spreading, I think one piece of machinery is that a trailing shoe costs over 50 grand.
Yeah.
I mean, farmers are playing their part, but I do believe that we should not take it that, oh, there's no more we can do. I think we need to unify as politicians. We need to come together with our farming organisations, and we need to all sit down at the table and show the Commissioner that we haven't been given enough time. 2 years is not enough, as Billy said. I agree. There's a European innovation programme on water quality, which will target 15,000 farmers up to 2027. There's 60 million. That wasn't there when we were awarded our derogation. And like, we need to look at all of these things, and we need to be sensible.
Grace, could money come from Europe, or does it have to be the national government?
Well, the first thing, I would agree with Carol in that, having a meeting with Commissioner Sinkevicius, communication is always important. Now, I suppose from my view, sitting in the European Parliament and seeing what's happened, I genuinely don't think the Commissioner is going to go back. So I think what is on the table, that no matter how much you discuss and all of the rest, I don't think the Commissioner is for moving. So what I would, very much encourage, that you communicate and you see, okay, well, if it isn't for moving, how are you going to go forward? So how are farmers going to be enabled to go forward, recognising that we are one of the very few countries in Europe that have a derogation. So my advice would be, look to pathways where you're going to move away from the derogation, because that's where, that's where you'll get the greatest support. And we
there
won't
is a
be
reason
outliers.
Ireland has a
'Cause at the
derogation,
moment,
though.
yeah, that's right. But we're outliers. And you can't, remember, the European Commission all the time, they talk about the level playing field. If they've created like a derogation, some might see it like an advantage for Ireland, I would be saying we as a country need to be looking at the constraints that are in agriculture at the moment and look at what opportunities do we have. We are an island nation, a maritime climate. Like, we have a very specific set of unique circumstances for farming. And we look, okay, how are we going to profit from that? How are farmers going to profit from that? How can we have farming that has less inputs? So with the situation in Ukraine, we couldn't import the fertilizer. And farmers started saying, well, actually, we can do better. We can have multi-species swards. We can farm better. And then from a green perspective, if the money is going to flow from Europe, it's going to flow into environmental schemes, into nature schemes, farming with nature, regenerative agriculture. But we're going to have to do it like all together and all around the table.
Grace, I'll stay with you for a moment, just to move quickly on to another topic, and that's in terms of live exports. So Ireland relies on live exports, for our agricultural trade. And what alternatives do you feel there are, if any, to move away from that model?
Again, like live exports, there's a lot of people who have major issues with animal transport. So the first thing we have to do with animal transport is make sure that the conditions that are in place are being adhered to and enforced. And that's probably on an interim basis. Longer term, my own view has always been, before I even got into politics, was what can we do here in Ireland in terms of processing? Do we actually have to always look at animal exports, live exports? Is there some way that we can process the meat here, create the jobs here? And
well, I'll ask Billy Kelleher. This is something that you're very familiar with, and I know that you have, stringently lobbied and fought to keep the live export trade alive for Ireland, because a lot of farmers have become reliant on exporting calves. You have, I suppose, wanted to maintain the live export trade, but with improvements, Billy.
Yeah, I sat on a committee in the European Parliament that looked at animal transport, and they were coming up with recommendations. In view of the fact that in some countries there isn't great adherence to welfare standards for animals in transport, not only just within the European Union but also to third countries. I believe
we have to admit and we have to hold up our hands as well. We have seen some cases in Ireland, obviously, recently.
This is the point. So, I mean, like, there's going to be a rule for the entirety of the European Union in terms of animal transport. We're an island nation. We have to have unfettered access to the single market, and that includes the transportation of animals. But it must be done in a way that respects the integrity of animal welfare. And we do need to raise the standards in terms of veterinary inspection, the types of vehicles that are used, feeding during transport. But we still have a reality that we have to face. We're an island, and ferries take 18 hours to go from Rosslare to Cherbourg in France, and that is a fact that we can never resolve. So we have to ensure that that is protected, but the safeguards put in place.
And can we reduce the number being, exported? There's a lot now about particularly dairy beef breeding, for example, genetics, and in terms of just not having the level, for example, of bull calves being exported abroad.
Yeah, look, I mean, longer term, I mean, like the entire of the dairy industry will have to look at the whole issue of sex semen, for example, and what calves are bred from cows for non-replacements. That's an issue that I think we have to explore in greater detail. Sex semen, the technologies are improving, the price is coming down, its accuracy in terms of impregnation is improving as well. But we do need to ensure that the calf that isn't going into the dairy for milk production is suitable for beef people. We can't expect a calf that is not suitable for beef to be bought by a person to take to a slaughter stage. It has to be a quality calf.
Yeah.
And that's an area that we have to do a lot of work. And I know the co-ops are at it and Teagasc are looking at it, but it's an area we have to make big improvements on.
Carol Nolan, I'll come back to you. Sorry, I'm trying to cover a lot of topics now while I have you here. But Carol Nolan, I'll come back to you, and contractors and spread and slurry at the minute.
Yeah.
They're flying it. I don't mean to contractor on the road now. That's not literally going out one gate and leaving it open and going to a next gate.
Yeah.
What can be done to support them at the minute? Because this has been unprecedented weather.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, it's entirely foreseeable. It's just back to this calendar farming. It's ridiculous. There shouldn't be a period there. I mean, let's support farmers instead of putting them under pressure. And certainly I took many calls from contractors over the last number of weeks. Because of the weather conditions, they knew that it wasn't possible to meet the deadline of the 1st of October. So I have made representations to both Ministers McConalogue and Minister Dara O'Brien. And I know that there's a decision to be made on that by the end of the week, but I'm calling on them, please, to give a bit of flexibility, to show a bit of common sense here and extend that deadline. It's just wrong. I mean, I see deadlines all the time put in place for farmers. And look, we all know how farming works. You have to go by the weather, not the calendar. And, there needs to be common sense in regard to this issue. Farmers are under huge strain already. We're told, we hear so much, and rightly so, about farm safety. But, this is contradicting the whole message of farm safety. When you see farmers under that strain and under that amount of pressure, it's not helpful. So I would hope, again, that common sense will prevail here. And also that we will see other instances where there can be more flexibility and not just tying somebody rigid down to a date or a calendar.
Grace, I'll come back to you, and forgive a bit of the banging. We're getting a few gusts in the door there, but we're still standing. Grace O'Sullivan, as a Green Party member, a Green MEP, do you think the Greens are losing popularity among the agricultural community, I suppose? I could do a show of hands in our tent here today to see who's a member of the Green Party. I'm imagining it's not going to be in the majority. And, the Greens come in for a lot of flack from the farming community that there's a disconnect between the two. Yeah. That maybe, farmers don't understand why Greens are bringing in all this policy, and Greens don't understand the grassroots of what farmers do. What would you say to that? Well,
first, my father was a dairy farmer down in Waterford, and I think if people look at who the Greens are, we have a lot of Greens in rural Ireland, different parts of Ireland. We have a lot of Greens who are from farming families themselves. And I think, I personally, as a member of the European Parliament, and I'm, relatively new to party politics, I came in 2016, but I'm out engaging with farmers all of the time down around Waterford. And what, I hear is that actually, and I know like the farmers, and I know we use the word custodians of the land. The farmers are the ones who are out there in the muck, in the soil, in the parlours, day in, day out. And I genuinely feel that the cooperation and the collaboration between farmers and the Greens isn't as bad as people think it is. What I think we've seen over the last number of years, my father was a member of the IFA all of his life, his farming life, and beyond. He was always a paid member even when he left the active farming. But I think what we're seeing is we're seeing a big change in Ireland in terms of the farming organisations that are representing the farmers. So it's no longer just the IFA, you're seeing the ICMSA, you're seeing, this morning I was speaking to beef and lamb farmers. If so many different agencies now and supporting farmers. So I think we're in a different time. The young farmers that I meet, are talking to me about soil health. And remember, it was only this July that we got the legislation in the European Parliament for soil health, so it's a soil directive. We had legislation on clean water, clean air, but nothing on soil. And that was part of my work to get that in. So I think that the farmers recognise, they know the challenges of climate change, the water pollution, waste. So I genuinely feel that sometimes there's kind of a media divide, them and us. But I think the Greens, we are absolutely, we're, in many cases, we're rural, we're farmers, and you'll see the elections are coming up in June 24.
I was just going to say, I'll have to exclude Carol for the moment, but I'll be coming back to you in 18 months, Carol. But for yourself, will they vote Green in the European elections?
We've over 100 so far, over 100 candidates going to run in the local elections for the Greens, and they are all over the country. So, and we're an all-island party, and we've been around a long time. That's the other thing about the Greens. We have been around. We have a lot of experience. So we're not Johnny-come-lately. We do stand our ground. We mightn't always agree, but at least we are here, and we are here to engage.
Billy, will the public put a Fianna Fáil MEP back in when they're not too happy with the Fianna Fáil Minister for Agriculture at the minute and what he did in Europe?
Well, look, I don't know. I think looking the round, the Minister for Agriculture works within the constraints that he has. There was a derogation negotiated some time ago. It was always going to expire at some stage. Clearly, we tried to extend it for as long as possible. I think what we should be, though, we should be ambitious for farming. We should be ambitious for agriculture. We should be ambitious for our agri-food sector. And I don't believe that reducing production is showing ambition and putting inhibitants on farmers in doing what they do best, which is producing food. And yes, we should be ambitious for the environment as well. And they are not contradictory. They can be compatible. Like, we should use the technologies that are coming to the fore. For example, in Ireland, we are so far behind in anaerobic digestion. It is a part solution to the challenges we have in the nitrates issue and in water quality and in methane emissions as well. So I just believe that, the simplistic view would be just to reduce output to address the environmental challenges. I believe we can be ambitious. We can continue to produce the highest levels, bearing in mind the population of the world is going to increase by 4 billion over the next 50 years. So we will require food, and Ireland is the best place to do that, but it needs to be ambitious, and like in areas of technology, anaerobic digestion, and all the other areas in genetics as well, with regard to breeding, we can do an awful lot, but reducing production is a simple solution to a complex problem.
Okay, I'm afraid we're wrapping it up there.
Yeah, very quickly.
10 seconds.
One thing, the supply chain. So I, as a mother, I want to eat Irish produce. I don't want to always have stuff brought up. So I don't want to see farmers' prices being cut and undermined by foods coming in from South America or places like that.
Yeah, no, the good ideals, I suppose, and very much sounding like electoral appeals to the public there as well. But thank you very much, our panellists, for joining us. We're just out of time. I think it's time for a break now to head maybe back out to the ploughing site and see who we can find.
I'm here with the head of the Agriculture Department at Bank of Ireland, Owen Lowry, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the Bank of Ireland tent today. I know you were offering some saplings out last year, so there's a lot to beat. What's on the cards?
Well, hi Louise, lovely to welcome you to the Bank of Ireland stand here today. As you can see, it's bustling with activity. A lot of people looking for shelter given the weather conditions. But yeah, look, we have a fun-packed, action-packed few days here on the stand. We're kicking off another ploughing talk that we're running over the 3 days. We have 9 talks focused on farming in the climate of change and what farmers need to do as we our aim to transition the economy and the agri-economy to a greener footprint over the coming years.
And just when you mentioned that greener footprint, a lot of Irish farmers want to expand in the area of climate change and sustainability. How can Bank of Ireland support them to do that in terms of money? You know, all these things cost.
Yeah, so Bank of Ireland bank 82,000 farmers, so we have a key impact on what we do at farm level. You know, we have a lot of touch points into farms, and I suppose as providers of finance we can influence the decisions that farmers make when they're borrowing money. I suppose some of those are that we want to offer our support to farmers as they transition to green. What that looks like is a green loan. So what that is, if a farmer's putting up solar panels or they're looking to invest in additional slurry storage, or they're using new farming practices such as protected urea, we can support farmers that are on those journeys and investing in green activities. And what that looks like essentially is it's a discounted loan, so which lowers the interest rates, and we give farmers the benefit and the reward for moving to green initiatives.
And do you think that farmers' engagement with sustainability factors will, in the long term, affect their ability to be able to get a loan?
Look, I think the sector has a huge challenge ahead of it. We need to reduce our emissions by 25% over the next few years. We see our role in this very much as supportive and enabling farmers to move to that, rather than so it's more about a carrot than providing a stick to the farming sector, and we can do that through our green loans.
Okay. Thanks so much for that, Owen. That's all from here.
So we've just dropped. This year, our live stream content at the National Ploughing Championships is being brought to you in association with UPMC, and I'm delighted to be joined here in the Agriland Pavilion by Clodagh Duggan. And Clodagh is the Network Development Manager with UPMC. Clodagh, you're very welcome in out of the rain.
Oh, glad to be in out of the rain. Thank you for having me.
First things first, I suppose, tell us a little bit about UPMC. Who are you?
So UPMC has been in Ireland since 2006. Initially came to the southeast to Waterford to provide radiotherapy services to patients who, prior to that, had to travel to Dublin and Cork for radiotherapy. It was a centre in the Whitfield Clinic, which the UPMC now own, and the business has grown. UPMC has grown in Ireland since 2006. We now have 4 hospitals in Ireland, in Waterford, as I said, Auteven Hospital, Kilkenny, UPMC Kildare Hospital in Clane, and most recently the UPMC Sports Surgery Clinic Santry in Dublin. So there's over 1,300 employed by UPMC in the country at the moment, which is a significant number. All local people, you know, providing services to local people, as we say. In addition to the hospitals, we have UPMC Sports Medicine Clinics, which are essentially physiotherapy clinics and Institute for Health, as we say. And what that means is patients can refer themselves in for physiotherapy. They can attend those centres for classes, which the girls alluded to earlier on, with osteoarthritis classes, post-oncology rehab classes, post-joint replacement rehab classes. And those centres are at the moment dotted in Waterford, Tipperary, Limerick, the Connacht Dome up in Mayo, and also in the Sports Surgery Clinic in Santry in Dublin. And we will be opening some new sports surgery clinics in other locations later on this year and early next year. And again, in addition to that, a lot of the younger people that come to the ploughing over the last few years might be aware of the UPMC Concussion Network, which is also new to Ireland over the last few years, which is a network that diagnoses and offers rehabilitation to those that suffer from concussion. And again,
very apt with the Rugby World Cup on at the moment, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, it's not concussion is not something that just sports people get. I mean, it can happen any of us every day in all that we do. So in a snapshot, that is what UPMC is.
So a whole suite of services, Clodagh, and I suppose it shows that there is a demand there, particularly on the sports injury side of it. But I suppose when we talk about sports injury, that's probably wider than, as you say, just sport as well.
Absolutely. It incorporates everything. So from, like, we're here meeting farmers who are out and about doing a very physical job on a daily basis, who suffer from aches and pains all over, from their shoulders to their hips to their knees to their feet and their backs. You know, those are all issues that happen, as I said, every member of the population. And you know, we have something to offer those patients in our clinics. I suppose we've been coming to the ploughing, UPMC have been coming to the ploughing since 2015, where we started with initially with a very small stand. And the reason we started to come to the ploughing was we felt that it's very important for, you know, us as a clinical setting and clinical people to come out and meet people in their own environment. It's going to be very daunting for people to, you know, pick up the phone to, you know, look for help, or, you know, be it a small issue or a big issue.
And sometimes people feel like ignorance is bliss, you know, that kind of sense of false sense of security, and that niggle will go away. And you'd probably be telling your family about it on a daily basis, but it going no further.
100%. And I suppose farmers in particular, and I've seen it myself over the years in the hospital in Waterford, you know, they'd come in to get something done, and one of the most common comments you'd hear is, "Oh, sure, I should have gone for about this ages ago," you know. And I suppose at the moment we're currently running a campaign about looking after yourself, the Mind Yourself series. And that message is really, you know, directed at the people that have maybe small little, you know, niggles, aches and pains, things going on that actually could be solved with very little help, but good professional help, you know, right advice, and that can get them back on track quite quickly. You know, not everything is a big job. Not every ache and pain needs a hip replacement, you know, a knee replacement. You know, there's lots of other things going on, and you know, we have here at the ploughing some of our expert physiotherapists and nurses up at our stand, meeting people and just, you know, having a chat with them, giving them some really practical advice.
And it's not to throw shade at the physiotherapy, or the physiotherapists, I should say, or any of the medical profession, but sometimes it can be very daunting to approach somebody in a clinical setting. So having somebody at the Ploughing Championships that you can kind of walk over to, have a bit of a one-on-one, and maybe just get a bit of, you know, confidence that maybe something isn't as serious, you know what I mean, as maybe you'd feared, because a lot of the time the anxiety around something can be an issue too.
So true. And I mean, when somebody like that who maybe feel, you know, a little bit nervous about approaching an issue, you know, when they come into our stand, and for example, we have a lovely physiotherapist, David Rosam, who is based in our Limerick facility. David used to be a milk recorder. As he was going through college, he worked for a company doing some milk recording, and you know, he's well able to chat to farmers coming in, and puts them at ease. And like I said, I suppose it just, we want to just show that we're just normal people too, you know, just trying to help everyone along. And look, you know, I know, you know, I represent UPMC, and we have a great network of clinicians around the country, but we're speaking to everybody. Go to your own doctor, your own physiotherapist. You know, it doesn't have to be us, but you know, there is plenty. You know, the most important thing is to seek out advice if you're looking for help.
And not to be suffering in silence, Clodagh, as well.
Yes,
you know,
exactly. And another message that has come up on the Mind Yourself series is, you know, have a look around your yard, make things a little bit easier for yourself. You know, we have some, you know, simple tips on our stand in terms of little items that may be useful. For example, you know, dairy farmers, they're in the parlour 365 days a year often now, twice a day on their feet. Something simple like pit mats, you know, that give that little bit of cushioning to your spine when you're standing there doing the job, you know, with your I know it's your upper arms that are using it, but you know, that cushioning can make a big difference, you know, when you're doing something over a number of years. And again, something simple like a head scoop on a crush, you know, things like that. Again, when you're dosing a large number of cattle, you know, a head scope is a very handy thing to have, you know, in terms of getting the animal into the right position. It saves the body a little bit of more.
And you're not being jerked maybe potentially as much.
Exactly. Exactly. And I suppose, you know, in the grand scale of things, they're relatively inexpensive, you know.
And there is the series of videos that we've done with UPMC on the Agriland website, you know, speaking to farmers as well on the ground, and they're sharing their story.
Absolutely. And I'd encourage everyone just to have a look at them. You know, they're just normal farmers that tell us what they do on a day-to-day basis and how they have addressed the various things that have happened to them over the years, and you know, how they prepare you know, for busy, heavy scheduled times on the farm. So you know, there's a lot of pinch points depending on what sector you're in, but like, you know, say our sheep and tillage farmer that was on our series, you know, lambing is a pinch point, you know, and he prepares for that. He has physio, gave him some exercises that he does because he knows he's going to be dragged and pulled for a month or 6 weeks. And
because labour is so tight on so many farms, Clodagh, and people are time poor as well on many farms, and that's when accidents can happen and people can get injured.
It's a massive issue. Now, like, I am speaking from personal experience. My own husband got ill last year, and again, we have very skilled labour. You know, we have some really good people working with us, and the community came in to help us, you know, but it is hard to keep the show on the road when something happens. But we were blessed, but like, not everybody, you know, might have that circle, and they feel that if they fall out of the picture, you know, things won't get done. You know, which is true. I can't say it's not, you know. So the more reason why you need to look after yourself. And as I said to you last year, Ashley, and farmers, if they see a lame cow, they won't leave it linger on, or a cow that's not well, they'll ring the vet tomorrow. They'll
always take second place, Clodagh.
Always take second place. They'll service the tractor on, you know, after so many thousand hours. No issue whatsoever. They'll put in the oil and replace the filters. But when it comes to themselves, as John said in our video, you know, when you run up the hours on your own clock, you know, you have to have a little look to see what you could do to help yourself. Yes, exactly.
And Clodagh, I suppose the ploughing as well, you're getting involved. A lot of people love to come to the ploughing to kick the tyres, and UPMC have got involved this year. There's a nice bit of machinery down on the stand that you can have a look at as well.
Oh, we do. WR Shaw in Tullamore kindly sponsored a tractor for us, which we have wrapped in the UPMC purple, so it's standing proudly on our stand, and we're very thankful to Shaws for that. But again, just to, you know, I suppose highlight, the physios are using that to just show good ergonomics in terms of seating position and all that sort of thing to farmers, and you know, we're very lucky to have that, and you know, we'd encourage everyone to pop up to row 34 there, stand 518, to see the tractor and of course to see ourselves.
Excellent. And Clodagh, look, finally, if for any reason people can't come ploughing this year, just to check out UPMC, and as you mentioned earlier, it's self-referral as well if people want to get in touch with you directly.
So for the sports medicine, yes, most of the things are self-referral. For the physiotherapy and the classes, if you look up upmc.ie, all the details are there. In our hospitals, obviously, the GP referral is required, and we do a lot of specialties in our 3 hospitals in Waterford, Kildare and Kilkenny, and obviously Santry is a specialised sports surgery unit, but all the details are on upmc.ie.
That's great. Well, Clodagh, thank you so much for joining us in the Agriland Pavilion, and thanks to UPMC as well, who've brought the live stream as well to you here from the Agriland tent in the National Ploughing Championships.
Welcome back here to the Agriland Pavilion at the National Ploughing Championships in Ratheniska, and part of our live stream in association with UPMC, which you just heard from there. We're just inside the tent, which seems to have really filled up because despite the sun that was predicted today, we've just had a very, very heavy shower here. So everyone's racing for a bit of cover, but we're nice and warm and dry inside. I'm joined now on our latest panel by Sophie Bell, Katie Shanahan and Thomas Duffy. Sophie is obviously farming. She's also a digital content creator. Katie, obviously, as you can see, works with Herdwatch, but she's also a presenter and, if I can call her, a TikToker. Like, I can speak like the kids. And Thomas Duffy, of course, who is well known as a former MACRA president, a former vice president of CEJA, a farmer himself, and a new columnist with Agriland. So thank you all for joining us. Sophie, I'm going to get you firstly to explain to the crowd and to the people watching online about your farming enterprise yourself and how you use social media as part of your daily activities. Yeah, no, they can hear you. Go ahead.
So I went to Harper Adams as an undergraduate 2 years ago, and I was originally beef farming with my father. We had a dry stock enterprise, and after that I came home from college and I decided to go into contract rearing dairy heifers, where I'm now rearing for 2 local dairy farmers. So that's what I'm doing at home. As well as that, I am working in a veterinary pharmaceutical company as a QC analyst, and I relief milk at the weekends too, and I've recently started studying in UCD for a master's. So it's
just in case you weren't busy enough.
But I try to incorporate my content into my farming activities throughout the week. It is fairly busy and quite full on, so I try to be as organic as I can about everything, and I think it's important to show people what I get up to, and
It is. And Katie, you operate a busy sheep and beef farm, but you're also a presenter and you're constantly putting up TikTok content and social media content. Where do you get the time to do all this?
I really don't know. Lack of sleep, I think, especially now this week. So I'm farming at home with my father and my brothers and my mother down in West Cork. So mainly sheep. We do have a few dry stock as well, but the sheep enterprise is probably something I push a little bit more just because I enjoy it more myself. So we'd have pedigree Charlie sheep and then a few commercial as well. But I suppose COVID started the whole social media journey. Me growing up, it wasn't something people did. There wasn't such thing as farming influencers on Instagram. TikTok didn't even exist. So during COVID, I downloaded the app for just a bit of crack and see what the videos were. And then it was very busy on the farm. You know, it was during lambing season and we were doing a lot of cross country with the horses and things. So there was loads of footage there, and I started throwing up videos and they really took off. People loved seeing farming life, and anything I put up was just literally what was happening every day on the farm. So it wasn't really extra work for me, and anything I do is stuff we're doing anyways on the farm. So it doesn't take much time. People think it does, but I do marketing as my full-time job for Herdwatch, so I should be good at making content and making videos, so I don't really see it as a job anymore.
I suppose people say agri-influencers, and a lot of digital content creators don't like the word influencer now. I don't actually know would I use the word influencer in agriculture, because what they mean by that is that people who have a big following online is they have the platform to influence people to maybe purchase something or buy something, whereas I feel you're more like agricultural educators for people not involved in agriculture, or just chroniclers, basically chronicling agriculture every day for people who are interested in watching someone else's farm, even if they're farming themselves.
Yeah, like I think there's such a message there to get out to not just people who are farmers, because farmers know what Irish farming is and we all love it. So I try and spread a message to the general public out there, and that's why TikTok is a little bit more fun. You know, you can get in young people who maybe aren't from a farming background, educate them that way. You can also reach a much younger generation. You know, even an hour ago, I was down in the sheep shed, and 3 young girls came up to me. She was only 14 years old, and she loved watching my content, and she has her own flock in her own name, and she had her sheep down in the stand. So I just thought that was amazing.
Yeah,
you know?
fantastic.
So trying to help people, young people like that, and educate them and promote them and try and get them into not just farming, but like myself, working for any agri company. The whole sector is great, so try and get involved, you know, any way you can.
Thomas Duffy, you are no stranger to working with young people as well, obviously being a former MACRA president, and then of course you went off and left us and went to Brussels, I suppose, to have a bigger circle of young farmers. But now that your vice presidency has come to an end with CEJA, just remind people about your own farming system, your dairy farming, Thomas.
Yeah, so we're dairy farming. We are currently milking at the moment about 80 cows. We would have been milking about 100, but we went down a little bit to facilitate a move to robotic milking. So we installed a Lely A5 as of March of this year. So it's been quite a lot of work transitioning to that, but it's enjoyable. And so, yeah, that's the main thing. We have no beef on the farm, although we sell all ex-farm. The long-term ambition for my farm, I suppose, is to get it to a carbon neutral state. And that's very ambitious, but we've already implemented most of the, as we call it, the low-hanging fruit of climate mitigation and reduction. So now, as someone said, you know, once you get to the end of that so-called menu in the MAC, in the Teagasc MAC, what do you do then? Oh, I'm already looking at things to do. So visited Denmark recently to look at some technologies around that as well.
That's really interesting. And the robots. So you farm with your parents, I believe, and your sister. So you know, there's a good amount of labour there as it is. So how are the robots helping you?
Well, we do, but I suppose the labour on the farm for the last 2 years, I was gone so often.
Yeah.
If you take it during the MACRA presidency, if I was there one day, it would be lucky. With the CEJA vice presidency, it wasn't as onerous or anything near it, but you would be travelling for at least probably 5-6 days in the month. And inevitably it would happen just when things were, you know, getting done or whatever, and you might be away, and you were also constantly working, so you were constantly on Zoom meetings, you were constantly in discussion around policy. So there was a lot of that work going on, even during COVID. With the presidency, with MACRA presidency, a lot of the work was just spent on policy, reading documents, preparing documents, lobbying TDs. So it was always quite busy. My father and mother are probably stepping away. My sister is part-time as part of the farm. So labour, I suppose, really is not that abundant. And on top of that, I suppose I am one of those people who, while I'm constantly looking for labour saving, I don't make life easy on myself either necessarily. No. So things like, say, for instance, the way we would manage our calves is probably a lot more onerous. We have a rule that no calf will ever get so we group calves at about 2 days into groups of 3, and that cow is the only cow that will supply them until they transition over to it. So if you take it before the robot, we would have had probably 7 dump jars. All of them have to be measured out. All of them have to be marked for an individual pen. We're quite detail focused on, particularly on calf rearing. But then on top of that, because we've transitioned to clover, and we have challenges around weed management and constantly revising that. We do have great contractors. I will be honest, I am not a machinery man. I want as little machinery as physically possible on my farm. But there is still a lot to do when you're trying to balance all those.
Well, I want to talk to the 3 of you. You're very familiar, obviously, with the online world. And Sophie, if I come back to you, there seems to be at times, now I'm not saying all of the time because, you know, you're examples of the alternate, but at times there's a lot of negativity towards farming and towards agriculture. And we all see it, you know, some social media platforms can be a cesspool of negativity. It doesn't have to be about farming, it can be about anything. Do you see that in your everyday life? Do you get much negative feedback, or can you also see the positives of using social media for farming as well?
I think personally, I kind of haven't really received any negativity. There would be the odd comment, but nothing that's, major. I think agriculture and social media has really revolutionized recently. It's been bridging the gap between consumers and farmers, and it's been educating and building that trust in recent years. And I think that's really important, and it's made a significant impact, and it's made such a difference. But I think there are maybe other accounts that do maybe speak out a bit more than I would, and they would probably receive some negative backlash. But I try to remain as positive as I can on social media, just because I wouldn't feel comfortable with that environment.
Yeah. And what about you, Katie? Have you experienced negativity, or do you see more of the positives of social media than the negative side of it?
Like, I suppose having social media now is, as important as ever, because we have seen that there's so many farmers, young farmers, that are either coming out of the sector or doing it part-time. They need a full-time job to support the farming, or else people are immigrating. They're completely leaving the farm, going off to Australia. Like, I have probably more friends that have immigrated from my parish than I do in my own parish. So
wow.
It was actually last year, I only recently joined Macra, and it was because of that, because I literally had no farm friends or, country friends.
Yeah.
Now I do now. I've met so many people through social media, which obviously is very, very positive. So that's why I'm using the social media that I have to try and push it as much as possible, and show all the positivities around Irish farming, and trying to get people to stay with it, get involved, rather than just all this negativity that is going on for young farmers in Ireland.
And Katie, we have a lot of young viewers on Agriland. We have TikTok is obviously kind of a younger demographic as well, and you've a lot of followers on TikTok. And we've been speaking to loads of young people out on the ploughing site over the last couple of days. They're mighty crack. Some of them know nothing about farming. Some of them were born and reared in a shed nearly, What advice could you give them as a young person, but maybe slightly older than them, coming up, who might be thinking, agriculture is not cool or farming's not cool? What kind of advice could you give them?
Yeah, sure. Like myself, when I finished my leaving cert, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and I suppose I didn't give myself the time to really think about it, look into what's available. Like, I only recently, last year at 27, went back and did my green cert in Clonakilty. So, like, that was major for me to go back down there. But even meeting some of the young girls down in Clonakilty and chatting with them, and they were delighted to be there. They had no issue being there. So I think you really just have to do what you want. I know it's very hard. It's a very hard thing for a lot of young people, especially, to do, is forget about other people's influence and focus on what you want and really drive. Because no one's going to hand it to you. You really have to do it yourself and go for it yourself if you want it. Mm-hmm. So I think it's tough for young people to do, especially peer groups, to kind of ignore that exterior influence that they have on your decisions, but just do what you want to do and focus on that.
Thomas, I'll come back to you. There's so much information available at our fingertips now. And that's a good thing, because information has never been more readily available to us. By the same token, there is a lot of misinformation available to us as well. And how important is it? Because you're someone who is, quite prolific with information online, but you always research it and make sure it's verifiable. How important is it that people find out what they need to know, be it about farming, be it about environment and so on, but find it from verifiable sources?
Yeah, and I suppose that is a massive problem with social media, because while social media is positive is that it gives everyone's voice, the negative is that it gives everyone's the voice. And there can be a misconception that, there's a great phrase that your ignorance is as good as my knowledge. Now, I always say I am not an expert in many of the fields that I talk about, and so the question is reaching out. And the bit I always get quite annoyed about in Ireland is that, in actual fact, a lot of this information is readily accessible from fairly reliable sources. I mean, if you go over to the Teagasc Den today, you won't find a bunch of people who were born in Dublin. You'll find mostly sons and daughters of farmers who went into research, they understand reasonably. I think there are probably two major problems. The first one is that we don't teach in schools the most important thing, and I know everyone's always saying we need to teach more in schools. We don't teach about things like the hierarchy of knowledge, right? The idea that peer-reviewed evidence is more important than informed opinion. So what I may have is an informed opinion on something, but if you present to me the study, the research, I'm obliged to change my opinion. I shouldn't reject that research because I don't agree with it. Instead, it should be, well, is this evidence good enough? And if it is, then we go with it. My use of social media, I probably spend a lot too much time arguing with other people about, people either misquoting agriculture, misquoting climate science, misquoting whatever it is. And the problem is agriculture often, we see one form and we maybe fail to recognize it in another form. In that we know when we see absolutely stupid ideas that, we're going to go grow cranberries and, on re-wetted bogs, or, that every piece of land in Ireland that's suitable for cattle or sheep can be converted over to tillage in the morning. I mean, that's obviously stupid. We know that. We know the soils can't maintain that.
Well, you know that because you're in farming, but there are plenty of people who don't know that we can't convert all the land in Ireland to tillage, you know? So how do we communicate that message if there are places online that they can get information that has a very strong voice, that's stronger than the people like yourselves in agriculture?
Well, the answer is that we need to become stronger. I think we also need to recognise, though, and sometimes I see this, you get a lot of frustrated people, a lot of frustrated farmers saying, how do you not know this? How do you not know about agriculture? And my response is always, do you know how your septic tank works? Because I don't know how a septic... As far as I'm concerned, the internals of an engine are...
Well, I only know because I had a problem with my septic tank this week, but that's, I didn't know before that.
But we learn things about plumbing because they come into our lives. We don't automatically... I don't know how a tractor fundamentally works. I understand the basic concept of internal combustion engine, but if you start talking to me about timing chains and injection modes, I don't understand those things. So I ask a mechanic, I ask someone like that. And we shouldn't get angry with people because they don't understand that there's a difference between a cow and a bullock when they've grown up, and some of them even grow up in the countryside and don't know the difference. We need to have a little bit more tolerance for that and help to inform them. And I think that's what a lot of the environmental and maybe some of the people who are very critical of agriculture are much better at doing, about reaching out and explaining it at a much lower level and not getting too dense with
I think that's probably a lot as well of what you do yourself in your writings online and what Sophie and Katie do online in terms of educating. I mean, do you get many questions from people when you're, doing TikTok videos or putting up Instagram stories? Do you get questions about what you're doing, Sophie?
I think I'd get questions mainly about their career paths or what they want to do, or maybe some guidance on going into agriculture. Maybe when I'm more specific about what I'm doing, or if I have a little farm hack or something, there would be a lot of questions about it. And maybe there would be some people asking, why would you separate the calves, or wanting to actually learn why rather than just taking it up as something that vegans find, I would get quite a lot of questions.
And Katie, the same to yourself. Do you feel that you get a lot of questions and people are interested in what you're doing by using the likes of social media? And I will say social media is not just for younger people, because I know so many farmers who are not on social media, older generation, but the son and daughters coming into them and say, did you see this on TikTok? Did you see this? And they're having a belly of laughs, or they're interested in it. So there's all generations watching you.
Well, it's the ploughing actually taught me, just from people coming up to say hello, that the amount of older men on TikTok, what farmers would surprise you. Yeah, so it's definitely, everyone is on social media now. I think it's the way things are going. But no, definitely people asking questions. But I also like to ask people questions because, I'm very transparent on my page. I documented my whole during the Green Cert journey. I was learning. I love asking people questions or their opinions on something. You'll always get people that don't agree with everything you're doing in farming, but I think that's just farmers. Everyone likes to do something their own way.
Yeah.
But no, it's a good platform to learn. And like, yes, you're not going to take everything as gospel. You know, you need to do your own little bit of research too. But it's a good way for people to communicate their ideas.
Well, we're just running out of time again on the panel, but I want to thank my panellists for joining us. You can follow them on social media anyway. We'll put their handles up on our own pages on Facebook and Twitter. Sophie does be on Instagram a lot. I know Katie's on Instagram and TikTok, and Thomas is very proficient with the old Twitter, or as they call it nowadays, X. So thank you very much for joining us. I think the rain has abated a little bit at the moment, so we might just pop out to the ploughing site again and see what's happening.
Deputy Healy-Rae, what should the government do about the derogation issue?
Well, you see, the first thing, there seems to be awful confusion because the minister doesn't seem to be aligned at all in the thought process with the Taoiseach. Because one day the Taoiseach comes out and says one thing, the other day the minister comes out and says another thing. The first thing they'd all want to start doing is talking to each other. And they'd want to start remembering our farmers. Because our farmers are the forgotten people in this whole thing. When they're talking about derogations, when they're talking about negotiating, when they're talking about everything, they have to remember the implementation that that's going to have and the impact it's going to have on our family farms. They seem to be completely oblivious to the pressures that farmers are under at present. It's not that long ago that we had a Minister for Agriculture telling people milk is the new liquid gold. I quote. That is what he said at the time, and that was Minister Simon Coveney. And he used those words, the liquid gold. So people, young people in particular, were encouraged to take long leases on farms adjoining them, borrow money, invest in new parlours and new systems, new computerised systems, purchase adjoining lands or lands near to them, and they were encouraged all the way. And now all of a sudden they feel that the rug is being pulled out from underneath them. That's with regard to the nitrates. And I just think that there seems to be a lack of joined-up thinking in what is happening between Europe, between what the Irish government is doing, this green-led government. I think that somebody should really do something about the posters that are on the way in here to the ploughing today, because it's quite disgraceful to see green party propaganda literature up on poles, trying to insinuate that they're doing something for farming when they're against Irish farmers. They're against the family farms. They're doing everything they can to shut down Irish forestry. We haven't seen a forest minister doing as badly since 1946. That's forestry. We've seen what has happened with agriculture. They're doing nothing for us in rural Ireland. And at the same time, then they're putting up posters welcoming us to the ploughing. I don't want to be welcomed by any Fianna Fáil person, any Fine Gael person, or any Green person putting their head up on a pole telling me that I'm welcome to the ploughing. Or anyone else, or the farmers of Ireland don't want to be welcomed by any of the above people either. They should keep their posters in their boots and their cars, not to be disgracing themselves, to have people laugh at them when they come in the road here today. But that's a different rant.
Do you believe the European Commissioner should have been asked to come to Ireland earlier?
100%, but sure, this is what I'm saying about joined-up thinking. The Minister for Agriculture one day said, that's it, ball burst, game over, door shut, no discussions, no nothing. The following day then, the Taoiseach comes along and says, no, I'm going to ask the Commissioner to sit down and talk to us. I mean, do those two people not talk at all? They're supposed to sit around the cabinet table and discuss things. Like they're on completely different agendas altogether.
And what are Kerry farmers telling you personally?
What Kerry farmers are telling me is they're sick to death of being told what to do. The custodians of our land are the people who own it. They're our farmers. The real Green Party, the real people who adore land, who want to protect our waterways, who have done everything so far that they could to improve their situations, that's the farmers. That's the men and women who own Ireland, who own our agricultural land, who own our forestry land, the people who fish in our seas, They're the real Green Party. They're the real people we should be listening to. But instead, we have a small group of people. Look at what votes the Greens got in the last election. Do you know, they shouldn't actually be on a sheep dipping committee, not to mind being government, because they have no responsibility. They have no sense of responsibility for the actions and what they've done. For instance, in the carbon emissions budget, as we'll call it, and the extra taxes that they've put on people, which, by the way, were wholeheartedly supported by Sinn Féin. I remember at the time, Sinn Féin said, oh, the government wasn't going far enough, quick enough. And that's what they're telling people that are crippled with the cost of fuel, and to see them putting up the price of agri-diesel, tractor diesel, car diesel, petrol and home heating oil, to see that go up because of decisions taken by this government. It's crazy. They've lost all sense of reality, and so have Sinn Féin. Before they go near getting into power, just remember what their track record on this is. They wanted more tax. They wanted to impose more penalties on people. We know how to protect the environment. We've been doing it for years. We improved, we went away from doomsteads and we put in the storage capacity that we were asked to do. We've improved our winterage of cattle instead of outwintering cattle like we used to all do long ago. We're all doing everything we can. And then we're being told, oh no, you're not doing enough. We must impose more taxes upon you. It's crazy.
Thanks, Deputy Healy-Rae.
Thank you very much.
Deputy Healy-Rae, what should the government do about the derogation?
Welcome back to the Agriland Pavilion here at the National Ploughing Championships in Ratheniska in County Laois. We're back in the stand, Agriland stand 305 if you want to pop in. It's quite breezy, but the rain has stopped thankfully, so pop in here. We've plenty of space and dry weather, and you can charge your phone as well. But I'm going to go now to our live panel at the moment, which is Alice Doyle and Pat Murphy. Both are going for election for Deputy President role of the IFA. So Alice, I'll go to you. I'll ask you both the same question. Firstly, Alice, why do you want to be the Deputy President of the IFA?
Well, look, I'm delighted to be in the position that I can run in the first place, yes. And I'd love to to do the role for the simple reason I think I bring a skill set to this role that nobody else has, because I have a wide range of experience behind me. I would like to be Deputy President because I think I can make a difference. I come with from a background where I've worked on farm, I've worked off farm, I represent the full farm family setup, and I think I can represent people very well on that. And I have a wide knowledge of all that, but I also come with a set skill of being able to negotiate, to advocate, because it came from my teaching over the years, and I can use that. As well as I said, I spent 2 years as farm family chair, and in that I have learned a huge amount about the needs that are on the family farm and what's facing the family farm. And I think I could do a very good job there. And I can bring a balance as well. And I'm not playing the female role on this one, but I think, a female balance on National Council and on National Officer Committee would be very good for the organisation as well.
But Alice, you've mentioned the skills that you would have there as a Deputy President, but you have a beef farm, you have a family, you're already farm family chair. Are you not busy enough?
Well, I'm very busy, yeah. But all women can multitask and we're good at it. And I'd like to think that any role I've ever played in, I've given it my best. And I think that each of those roles are complementary. They each supplement and complement each other. So I think I could carry all of those. If my farm skills, my knowledge of the farm, my working on the farm while I was also working off farm gives me a lot of knowledge from a farming point of view. I have my off farm skills, which are also very important. My family are grown up at this stage, so they're looked after and they're very supportive of me in this, which I think is a great help. Instead of me having to mind them, they're minding me. And as far as being chair of the farm family, that has given me huge insight into the working of the farm family and of all the different things I need to know there. So I think I've worked very hard in farm family for the last 2 years, and I don't think Deputy President could be much harder than that, because I've had to put so much time into that every day. I give that hours every day, and I think I've brought the profile of that committee up because I have put that time and energy into it, and I've been able to put that time and energy, and because I have a good support at home, I can make that time at this stage.
Pat Murphy, I'm interested to know also why you want to be Deputy President of the IFA.
I'd like to continue to represent farm families. I'm a family man myself, married to Anna. We have 3 kids, all in college at the minute. So I have a huge idea of the challenges that families are facing. And we're facing challenges on a daily basis, on income, on life throws challenges at us on a continuous basis. When you look at what farmers are going through at the minute, we have the derogation issue. There's a huge fear out there with families. The weather is a huge impact on families this year. Everyone that's come up to us at the ploughing this year has said in their farm organisations to give them a little bit of optimism. So that's what I bring. I have 20 years experience representing families within the IFA, and I'd like to continue to do that. When you look at the derogation, as I mentioned a minute ago, people are saying, are we going to be able to keep the 220? The 250 is dropping down the 250 to the 220 has been a huge hit to me and my family that's in me. So if we don't put up a fight, if people like me who is in derogation aren't able to fight for them, that's where the leadership, and that's why they look for people like me to represent them, and that's what I bring to it. It's the same in all aspects of life. We go to the nitrates or the emission targets. Again, being a derogation farmer, we have been, a huge ask has been given to us over and above, we'll say, people that are not in derogation. We've accepted that challenge. We have, you're basically accepting that you're going to be inspected on a yearly basis. You're being asked to do the low emission slurry, grassland reseeding, all that we now see is nearly taken as for granted or put in there. We've done that. It has worked. We've proven on our farms that it has worked. But yet, the government are saying, oh no, forget about it. Water quality isn't improving. But yet we have the best water quality in Europe. We have better water quality from a lot of countries that have the 170 already that don't have a derogation. So we're already there. And that's why people want leaders to fight for them. I'm there already, and that's why I want the job to continue to fight.
And Pat, you're aware, I suppose, of the challenges facing the dairy sector at the moment, being a dairy farmer yourself. But the Deputy President role, like what about tillage, what about sheep? Are you as acutely aware of the issues affecting those sectors?
Yes, I'm a suckler farmer as well as a dairy farmer. I'm also growing some tillage, and I was 21 years growing potatoes, which I had to get out of because customers' attitude had changed, and quotas at the time lifted. So we took a management decision that the help just wasn't there. Family was younger. I was after losing my dad as well, who was always with me for the 21 years that I was growing potatoes. So it was sadness that I exited that, and I still have a fondness for it. But I still have coming from the west of Ireland, you have a huge handle on what people are facing. All my neighbours are dry stock farmers. They are the backbone, whether it's sheep and sucklers or rearing stores and even killing cattle. They're the backbone of the west of Ireland. They're my neighbours because where I come from in Ardrahan, there's pockets of dairy farmers. It's not big dairy farmer country. Go back to where I have the sucklers in the Burden. That's all suckler areas. And if you take sucklers out of that area, you're basically you're returning that landscape to where it was a number of years ago. When the department actually said, and Europe actually said, hold on a minute, we're destroying the flora and fauna of the Burden area. And it proves that working with farmers works. So, even in our area, sheep, the store lamb trade is on the ground at the minute. We haven't been given any help. IFA have been looking for €30 for the sheep the sheep payment for the last 4 years. We've got €2. In that time, we've got €2 from this present government. We've been promised in the programme for government that we will get a REP scheme similar to what we had originally. We got acres. It's heavily subscribed, but it's not near the scheme that we were promised, that was there in the past, that did so much good for the environment. This acre scheme, farmers are benefiting very little out of it. They are in it. They have no choice but to try and be in it. But there are so many other people hanging off them and doing well off them because trying to be part of the scheme. And the cost of getting into the scheme and abiding by them. We need to reduce those areas.
Alice, I want to come back to you and your experience with farm families and how that would, you've mentioned a little bit there of the experience that you've garnered through that. How would that practically translate in terms of representing farmers nationally as Deputy President? Yeah. How would farm families is a very important element of agriculture. It's more, I suppose, the associated part of being a farmer is the farm family and what that entails. So how would that represent farmers better?
Well, I think looking back on my time with the Farm Family Group, I have represented every group in farming in that, because of the 29 members on my committee, they represent 29 regions, and they bring everything from that. I have every type of farming family represented that. Doesn't matter what category it is, what commodity it is. I have them all there, plus all the extras. And I have worked very hard with my committee, and I've showed great leadership in that committee. And I think that's what the Deputy President's role is about. It's about leadership. And I think my committee would very much vouch to the fact that I have shown huge leadership in that. I've taken that committee from being a very quiet committee in the organisation to being one of the forefront committees within 2 years. And I think my committee showed that I have that leadership to bring people with me, that I can identify issues with them, but I identify them with them. I just don't pick them for myself. I identify the issues with the committee, we discuss it, we deal with it, and we go and we negotiate for whatever we need to do, we advocate for that, but we plan. And one of the things that I think that I can bring to this, which I've gained from my committee and from my years of experience, is that I can set goals along with my fellow officers. I won't be the only one, remember. If I was elected, even when I am elected, I would be the Deputy President. I would be answerable to the President and to the committee members and to the other commodity members, the commodity chairs, to the county chairs, the National Council. What my committee would vouch for is that I have always listened to the voices of the people coming forward. I take their skills on board. I take their attitudes, their points of view on board. I harness those as a chair. And we work on that then as a group, as a collective group. And I think as Deputy President, that's what's needed. We need to be bringing all those points of view together. Pat has listed all the different things that are out there. I'm acutely aware of all of those. And if we work on those, but we have to work as a united group on that. And I think communication is huge. I communicate very well in public. I communicate very well privately with the groups. And I think I could communicate very well with the department and with any other bodies that we have to work with. And I've learned that through my years of experience. I've worked with all kinds of departments of education, health over the years, and I've learned how you deal with that. And I think I can bring that skill. And that has come through, it has been proven in a smaller scale on my Farm Family Committee, that I bring people with me. I listen, because communication is a two-way process. I listen very carefully. I communicate back, fluently, and then we take it to the fore and I sell it out there then. And I think that for IFA is what we have to do. We have to sell the good work that farmers are doing. We need to sell the good commodity that we have and sell it to the public, but we also need to be able to deal with the bodies that are regulating for us. And I think I have that skill, and I think I'd be well able. I'd be pretty forceful in doing it, but I'm good at setting goals. And most women, I think, are very good at following through. That's something we really have. When we set our minds to something, we follow through on it. And I think I can bring that. And most people who know me know that I don't give in easily. If I have a point of view, I will listen, and I won't be domineering, but I will listen, and I will bring that with me. But if I think something is worthwhile, and I think a group of people think it's worthwhile, I will go with it. Okay.
Pat Murphy, when you're Deputy President of the IFA, obviously it's representing every farmer in the country. Now, we know that farming in Galway and Mayo is not like farming in Tipperary or Cork. Yep. It's very different. There's very different and specific sets of needs in different areas. So, you've been representing in Galway and in the region there for great number of years, and you're chatting to your colleagues there in IFA and everything, but what can you do in terms of the national farmers? Because they will be different. Hill farmers will have different needs to dairy farmers in the heart of the Golden Vale and so on.
First thing that you need to do with any farmer is to listen to what they're saying to you. No matter where they are, they have concerns that's unique to their regions. And it's one thing that I've always done in my time in IFA, is listen to the people and try and represent what they're asking of us. So by listening and trying to deliver and working for them, you can then deliver for them. There's a lot of challenges out there. And Alice is right in what she said. We're poor at selling ourselves. We're poor at selling ourselves as food producers. Whether it is, we feed 40 million people in the world, yet we have a government that wants us to cut back, that forces us to cut back, that's putting legislation in place. Other countries aren't doing that. America are putting incentives in place. Why can't we follow that? To reward people that are in a position maybe to scale back a bit, but to also reward the people that are actually providing the food that all of us here today eat. We have a very good product. We produce food that's sustainable, that's low food mileage, that is nutritious. We're the best in Europe at producing milk, one of the best in Europe at producing beef. We need to get out to our consumers and sell that story. We need to complement what AgriAware are doing, especially with young kids, to get into the schools, sell it to them, put a face to who's producing the food for you. And if that's the Deputy President of IFA, to put their face up there and say, this is a food producer. They produce milk, they produce beef, they produce egg, they produce poultry, or pig and pork. That is the way that we can put a value back to our consumers, to the people that go into the shops on a weekly basis and think that food comes from a shelf or a storage unit. It comes from a farm. And that's what we need to do as an IFA. We need to keep pushing that. And that's how we can reward our hill farmers and our tillage farmers who, to be honest about it, have had a disastrous year across the country.
We're running out of time, but I do want to ask a question of both of you, because I want to think that IFA is not a cult and it's not above reproach or criticism if it needs to be, or to take on board things. So I'll ask you both the same question. Alice, what, in your opinion, has the IFA done wrong over the last few years, and what has it done right, briefly?
Okay, we're 68 years old, so we must have done something right or we wouldn't be still here. And I think over the years we represented farmers very, very well. The last few years have been very difficult, and I think we're probably falling down greatly on communication. It's the biggest thing. We have a good product. As an organisation, we are needed, and it's only when we're without us we'll realise. If we're without us, we realise how much we are, how much value we are. And I think that's been our biggest problem, that we have lost communication with our members and we've lost communication with the public. And remember, it's the public now are dictating really what we are going to do. They are in the majority and they are watching what we're doing. They're not aware. They might be watching, but they're not aware of what we're doing, and they're not aware of what we have. And I think we need to get out there. We need to be able to get on the airways. We need to be able to communicate. We need to be able to speak very clearly about what we have to offer. So that's where I think we need to improve. We have done very good, as I said. We've done, over 68 years, can't all have been wrong. But we need change too. Look, at any organisation that's worth its salt must evolve. If you try to do the same thing over and over again and expect to get a different result, that's a recipe for disaster. And I think we're moving there. And I think if IFA, and I'm again not playing the female role, but I think if IFA can elect a woman this time, they're going to prove that they have moved on, that they are representing a very big part of their organisation, which are women, which haven't always been, they're not intentionally not being recognised, but they haven't been recognised and the work that they've put in. And I think if the farm women could see that they now have a very valued part in IFA, I think that would be progress. So I think that's where we might have been a little bit weak, by recognising women in the organisation, by not communicating. We can correct both of those, and I think if I was elected, I will correct both of them.
And Pat, what has IFA maybe not done well and not done right, and then what has it done?
I think we've lost the ability to listen, to really listen. And when you look at, some of our members have gone and formed and joined different organisations in the past. And we have to ask ourselves, and be humble enough to ask ourselves, why did that happen? How could we have prevented it? And more importantly, how can we get it right? At the minute, we're too divided. Too many different farm organisations out there. We're playing into the hands of the department who just want to divide us. I think my role as Deputy President would be to try and talk to each one of those and say, do you know what? United, we're a lot stronger. Divided, we fall. That's what I would do. That's what I would bring there.
We have to wrap it up, I'm afraid. We've come to the end of our live panel discussion here between the IFA Deputy Presidential candidates, Alice Doyle and Pat Murphy. We're going to head back out now to the ploughing site here in Ratheniska, but stay tuned because we will be back with Minister Pippa Hackett.
Hi, I'm Colin with Agriland, and I'm here with Seamus McManaman, the Board Bia Livestock and Sheep Meat Sector Manager, here to talk about the sheep trade this year. So, Seamus, this year, what has the trade been like for Irish sheep farmers?
Well, the quotes at the minute there, you're talking about 620 cent a kilo. That's all in with your quality assurance bonus and everything. Now, it is just slightly ahead of where we were last year, but obviously the price has been eroded by those higher costs of production. You know, it has been a difficult year for Irish sheep farmers with those higher costs coming in. And we've seen that reflected in terms of the number of lambs coming forward for slaughter. You know, the kill to date's running about 70,000 ahead behind where it was last year. That's the spring lamb throughput. And that is just a direct reflection of the higher cost of production, and producers maybe opting, you know, not to concentrate feed, and it slowed down the throughput of lambs for the year to date.
And so producers, what I've been hearing is throughout certainly the last few months, they've been quite keen to be getting well-fleshed, heavy lambs, but they don't really seem to be getting that. I suppose the added costs of feed would factor into farmers trying to finish lambs. Has that been a problem for Board B to market?
I suppose we've had a difficult year in terms of producing lamb. You know, it's been a funny year for growing grass. We went from very dry spells to very wet spells. And if you look at the average carcass weights of the lambs coming in, they're probably back about a kilo and a half from where they would be. But if you look at the kill as a whole, there's an awful lot of lighter lambs coming in, and it is a lot harder to find a home for those type of carcasses and cuts. You know, if you get that ideal 18 to 22 kilo lamb, you know, you have the carcass trade into Europe, you have your retail and your food service trade, they all want lambs within that category. So once you produce lamb below that and above that, you're producing carcasses and cuts that are a lot harder to find a home for, and that's then reflected in the price back to the producer.
And so a lot of farmers, I suppose, throughout the year, they were hearing the potential for an export market to the United States. Is there any sort of an update on that market?
Well, I suppose as Board B, we're constantly looking for the best market that give the greatest return, and the US does give great opportunities in terms of, you know, being able to sell our Irishness, and they're looking for a high-end product, particularly in food service. But we have the market access piece sorted. It's now just getting the individual plant approval sorted out. So that is a very technical process. So the department and Meat Industry Ireland are continuing to work through that. But I suppose once we get that approval sorted, we have a suite of activities ready to go in the market. You know, we have our EU campaign that covers China, South Korea, Japan, and America. So that US element is just ready for kickoff as soon as the access is granted and we get product into the market.
And in terms of Irish exports to the EU, how have they been in comparison with last year's figures?
Volume-wise, they're probably more or less the exact same. To date, for the first 6 months of the year, we exported about 226 million, I think was the export value for the year to date, which is back 4% from the year before. And that's just reflective of that lower price back to farmers. But in terms of volume, it's been more or less the exact same volume. And Europe continues to be our most important market. They take about 3/4 of everything we export. So that continues to be the focus then of most of our in-market activity and promotional work and engagement with customers.
And so then a little closer to home, just across the border into Northern Ireland, what has the trade been like between those areas of sheep coming from the north?
I suppose it is just a factor of the Irish sheep trade is that there is a proportion of the lambs come down, you know, to be processed here and marketed on. We're actually running behind in terms of numbers being imported this year. There's quite a strong GB trade for sheep meat, and that's kept a lot more lambs north of the border. So we've actually seen less lambs coming south for processing, and that's contributed to the reduction in the spring lamb kill for the year to date.
And I know you may not be keen to give a forecast for next year, but is there anything farmers can hope to expect in terms of any particular times of the year that there will be a good demand for lamb?
I suppose at the minute, if you look at the kill in general, you know, we're probably looking at slightly more hogs being carried into next year again. We're probably looking at about another 30,000 on top of what was already carried this year. Now we do have Easter and one of the Muslim festivals and St. Patrick's Day all in March this year, so that should hopefully stimulate demand. There's also the likelihood that we'll have a smaller lamb crop next year. Now this is crystal ball, but we're looking at a lot of ewes that have been appeared for the cull this year. There was a lot of ewe lamb hoggers processed last Easter, so we could see a further reduction in the breeding flock. That'll be the second consecutive year in the breeding flock, and that will carry through then in terms of the number of lambs coming forward. So, like there should be good enough demand there in the early months of the year, and it's just about just trying to find the highest value markets and the best paying customers for them.
And then, are people eating lamb here in Ireland? Have you noticed any trends over the last year? Is it still a popular meat, or has the price maybe put some people off of it?
Oh, it is. Like, lamb is no doubt a very high cost protein, and there is this association that it's a weekend meal, like a roast or a joint or a dinner. So I suppose the focus of our promotional campaigns has been to show the versatility and the health aspects of lamb and getting it into the younger consumers' sort of repertoire of recipes and things. So our domestic campaign for quality shore lamb actually kicked off yesterday. So it covers things like TV, radio. We're doing a lot more on social media to attract into that younger audience. So there's been a bit of a shift towards and using younger promotional and chefs and influencers as well, to attract people, and just to show that lamb can be used for a range of dishes and it's not just for your Sunday roast.
And just I suppose for next year, for farmers, they will have the quality assurance bonus for them. But when prices do just drop down like they have at the moment, they should be aiming really to try and get their lambs out when the prices at their peak in the summer.
I suppose the biggest thing is producing a lamb that the market wants. So to engage with your factory and make sure that you're producing a lamb with the right carcass weight, the right fat cover. And I suppose there were traditionally big peaks in supplies of lambs in June and then again in the autumn, but it has kind of balanced out over the course of the year, and that makes it easier to market in terms of consistent volumes. But no, it is about producing a consistent product, and it is that consistency then that a customer in an export market is willing to pay for.
Thanks very much, Seamus.
All right, no problem.
Thanks for that.
Tent at Dairy Geezer with the two owners, Sil and Martin. First of all, Sil is going to tell us a little bit about what Dairy Geezer actually is and how it works.
Dairy Geezer is an instant water heater specifically designed for Irish dairy hygiene. It actually works. It's a boiler system, and it's run on oil. Let it be diesel, kerosene, or on vegetable oil. It's specifically used in the bigger dairy enterprises because it has massive advantages over all the traditional systems, which are mainly electrical. It heats the water to a higher temperature. It maintains the temperature much longer, which is really important for the hygiene, particularly with thermoduric problems. And also it keeps going instantly for as long as you want it.
And in terms of savings, how would Dairy Geezer help farmers economically?
The traditional system really is electrical, and we all know now the price of the electricity. Some recent survey we done with the farmer, for 16 units washing once a day, hot wash, and an 8,000 tank, he saved €10 per day, which annualises up to 3,180, and over 10 years 30,000. So there's massive savings. And the other side of it is the purchase is 4,489, including VAT for our standard machine. But you can get half of that back with a TAMS grant and VAT reclaim. So in effect you get half the price of it back in grants for that. So you actually save it probably less than a year for the average farmer.
And you mentioned vegetable oil there, so Dairy Geezer has recently branched out to include HVO vegetable oil. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how that works, Martin, and how you decided to start doing that.
Well, because we burn kerosene, we needed to look at more greener opportunities. So what we done, HVO is a derivative from animal fat and vegetable oil. So we extensively tested it in our premises in Cove in Cork.
and we ran it for the last year or so. We found that our efficiency rates are roughly the same as kerosene, so you get the same savings, but it's now the most greenest way of heating water now on the market.
So clearly farmers can get a lot of benefits from dairy geyser, and maybe is there any other sectors that could get benefits from it, or that would be able to enjoy the product as much as farmers?
Yes, we have machines in a lot of different enterprises. For instance, we've recently located one for Carlow Brewing Company, and our anecdotal evidence suggests that it is really useful for the brewing industry. We've also used them to heat jacuzzis.
Oh, wow.
We've used them in the pharmaceutical industry. And another one, which we have a number of them in, is in the cheese making industry. So these applications in a number of industries. If you need hot water fast and in large quantities, this is the machine that does it.
Okay, thanks so much, Still and Lester. I doubt you need a jacuzzi today, but that's all from us here.
And you're very welcome back to the Agriland Pavilion here at the National Ploughing Championships in Ratheniska in County Laois. Our live stream brought to you in association with UPMC this year on site. Next up here on the stage, I'm joined by somebody who might need no introduction to people here in the tent and watching at home. Of course, it's Minister of State at the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, with special responsibility for land use and biodiversity, Green Party Senator Pippa Hackett. Pippa, you're very welcome to the Agriland Pavilion.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
And look, I suppose, firstly, before we go any further, our sympathies on the passing of your father very recently. And, you know, we just wanted to extend our sympathies first to you. And I suppose there's no point welcoming you to the National Ploughing Championships because you're on home turf at the moment. It might be a bit soft out there, but people are enjoying this. This is a very important part of the agricultural calendar.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, you can see the crowds today. They're probably a little bit bigger than yesterday. The weather wasn't great yesterday, but, you know, 60-odd thousand people still turn up. And once you're dressed for the weather and have the right gear on, I could have done with some wet weather gear on top of everything else yesterday, but good. It's really enjoyable. I think it's great for people to meet old friends, and there's so much here. You know, it has really developed over the years. I remember coming, you know, over the last 20 years. And it was always very much about the sort of machinery, but now there is everything, you know, from the whole livestock side. There's fashion shows, there's cooking, there's every sort of enterprise. It's innovation. I mean, it's wonderful to see, and even, you know, even like stands like yourselves here, it's great to see.
Yeah, and I suppose, look, they say that there's no such thing as bad weather, it's bad clothes. So
absolutely.
Yeah, we've all learned the hard way in the last 24 hours, that's for sure. Minister, we're going to start with organics because just in the last few hours here at the site, you have launched a new organic online hub. Can you tell us what that's about?
Yeah, this was an ask really that came from the sector itself and from farmers, and it was really by sort of joining the dots in production from sort of the farm gate all the way through to the finished product. And I suppose that has been one of the challenges of organics, that we've seen sort of leakage, as they call it, from organics into the conventional sector, and that has an impact then on you know, what's available at the market end. But this organic trading hub, I suppose it's a little bit like a done deal, but for organic farmers and for organic producers. And it's just launched today. It's already active. People can log on to the site, organictradinghub.ie, and there'll be animals up there for sale. If you want to buy some hay, go on there. If you want to sell your straw, go on there. And it's really about to create a bit of a marketplace for organic products and produce.
Mm-hmm. And look, I mean, the interest in organics is enormous for many, many different reasons. We've seen rising input costs, and we often hear that many farmers are very close to being organic.
Yeah.
You know, it's just maybe the extra step, maybe it's reducing or eliminating entirely chemical fertilizer use on farm. I suppose the organic farming scheme, it's due to reopen again this year. Can you give us a date on when it's due to reopen? Because there might be farmers here who are interested in conversion?
Well, look, we don't have an official date yet. We still have to finalise the budgetary requirements for next year on that. But I mean, last year it opened in around October, maybe the middle of October. I would think we'd be looking at the same sort of date, and it probably stays open until maybe mid-December. So there's plenty of time there. You're right, there's been a lot of interest. I mean, it's certainly, it's certainly gone to the top of a lot of people's thoughts when they think about their farms, what they might do over the years ahead. For a number of reasons. As you say, the rising input costs is one element, but also it's something that, when we went into government, we wanted to see more of. It's certainly the direction of the European Green Deal, wants to see more organic farming. And it's not just for the sake of organic farming, because it has the benefits in terms of the sustainability criteria, the improvements in water quality, biodiversity, and all those things we hear so much about nowadays. And it's just an option there. We have it out there. We've it well supported, well funded. Farmers get good supports if they want to. We can help them convert to organic farming. And as I say, it's not for everyone. Mightn't suit people's enterprises. It mightn't suit their farms, but it is an option. And if anyone's anyway interested, there's plenty of advice here at the Ploughing in the Organic Tent, organic village. I'm demeaning it, calling it a tent. It's a large venue, and it's great to see that Teagasc and the ACA and the advisory services and Board BIA and my own department and the farm orgs have got behind it, so it's really welcome.
I suppose what I would say though when it comes to organics is there is huge interest, but when the last round of the scheme opened, it was farmers predominantly on the western seaboard. But when we look at the sectors, are we leaving dairy behind when it comes to organics? And we spoke about this because by coincidence, I interviewed you on the Agriland stand last year as well, Minister. And we spoke about the issues with organic dairy. And since we've spoken about that, a group of organic suppliers have come together. They're enormously concerned. I mean, we have about 70 odd dairy farmers who are organic and maybe in or around 30 who are currently on conversion. But there's huge issues there. I mean, the cost of their inputs is very, very high. But the price they're being paid for their milk is static. They're not eligible for any bonuses. How are we going to attract the dairy sector into organics? Or are we just primarily, is the government's focus maybe more on dry stock?
No, we really want to see all farmers come into organics, and dairying, I mean, is a very important part of that. And as you say, the numbers are still low. I mean, in all honesty, we've come off a very strong dairy year last year. Prices in the conventional sector were very high, and certainly were, competing, if you like, with the organic price. But the organic price stays pretty stable over the years. If you look at the average price over the last 10 years, for example, it doesn't fluctuate to the same degree that the conventional price.
But the feed price fluctuated quite significantly.
But I think that's one of the elements of, if you are going to become an organic farmer, you have to think about all of those things. It's not literally, what do I replace my feed with? What do I replace my inputs on my farm with? It's thinking about it a different way. What can I do on my farm that lowers my input costs? Now, I know a number of dairy farmers who've only recently converted to and people might be familiar with them on social media and so forth, but they made the changes on their farming systems many years before they went organic. They had essentially weaned themselves off fertiliser. They were growing high protein crops, and they're replacing some of those high input things, whether it's fertiliser or feed, with crops they can grow themselves on their own farms. And that's the sort of mindset shift that you need.
But what can you do as the Minister to help dairy farmers to convert to organic if they want? Because at the moment there is a problem in that sector.
Well, I mean, even if you look at the supports we've put in place for things like multi-species swards, for red clover, all of that enables farmers to move off the fertiliser roundabout, if you like. And we're not saying reseed your whole farm next year. You can try it field by field. You can assess it on your own land. You can see how your soil interacts with it, if it's working, if it's not. So, I mean, there are steps people can make now. They don't have to think about going organic, but, maybe if they do that for a number of years, they might find, actually, I'm coping really well here without those inputs. And in fact, they'll be saving money straight away, or I should spin that around, they'll be making more money straight away.
So what role do the processors have here? Because obviously, as I said, it's just a constant price that these farmers are receiving. They can't get bonuses where the conventional dairy farmer can. How do they make it attractive, and how can you encourage them to make it attractive?
Well, certainly, we know now that Bord Bia have really sort of are really sort of pushing now the organic sector. They put in place a standalone organic manager to look at those markets, and the demands are strong for organic dairy produce, not just in Ireland but across Europe. And it is about tapping into that. It is about accessing that and creating that demand. It is chicken and egg, because people will say, well, I'm not going to go organic if the markets aren't there. The marketplace will say, well, if you can't supply me with a constant supply of product, there isn't a marketplace for it. So I suppose it's about trying to balance that. We've seen it in the beef and the sheep sector. There is a good demand for beef. There is good demand for lamb. People think, oh no, there isn't, but there actually is. And I met quite recently with Irish Country Meats, and they could threefold the amount of lamb that they process. Some of the challenges are that having it a constant year round, but that's the same for every market. Organics is no different. And ultimately, at the end of the day, farmers can't affect change in the marketplace, whether it's conventional or organics. But what we do know is that consumers' attitudes are changing. Conscientious consumers are looking to understand how their food was produced, where it was produced, and organics certainly fits that bill.
Before we leave organics, Minister, obviously the target is somewhere around 450,000 hectares, which will be about 10% of the agricultural land in the country. To my knowledge, we're at about 2.5 as things stand.
We're a little more now with the more recent additions, even though they're not fully converted yet, but we're probably up near around 4% already. That's coming off a base of about 1.6% when we entered government. So the strides are being made there.
So are you confident by 2030 we're going to hit that target?
I think so, and potentially I think as the critical mass of the sector grows, we might even surpass it. But I'm absolutely confident we will.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I suppose we're going to move on, Minister, because obviously forestry is another major part of your brief, and it is, I suppose, a part of your brief that you've come in for sharp criticism. Many people have called for your resignation on this issue on forestry. The licensing issue has been, horrendous at times, and we've spoken to so many people who are involved in forestry. The confidence in forestry is at an all-time low. We have a €1.3 billion forestry programme now. But can you tell us where things stand at the moment? Because there seems to be uncertainty. We had the Cabinet approving the final version of this programme, but the EU Commission then subsequently giving us a drip feed in August of individual aspects of the programme that has state aid approval. What's left now? Is there any other aspects of this programme that are left to be approved by the Commission? Can we kick on from here? Are we still waiting for a green light from the Commission? Because we seem to be a little bit in the dark on that.
I might back up to the start of your question there. And when this government took over, when I took over my role as minister, we were faced with an absolute crisis in the sector. Not of this government's making, I might add. It was previous administrations had let things hadn't dealt with things well. So when I started in my role, we had a massive backlog in the appeals process, which had in part caused issues with the licensing. This was all due to an EU court case that was taken against Ireland in 2019, which caused us to have to change how we issued our licences, because we hadn't been doing them correctly. We hadn't been taking enough environmental considerations into play. So I've worked really hard for the last 3 years to clear up all of that mess, to develop a licensing system that is now fit for purpose, that turns around licences in as quickly as possible time. You're not going to get a licence in 2 or 3 months or 4 months. It's a long process. But there's no delay now in felling licences, and I think we are at a very exciting time now for forestry, because we've cleared the decks of the dishes. Now, to move on to where we're going from now, we did have a prolonged state aid approval process. We need approval from the EU even to spend our own money on forestry, from competition laws and things like that. And we have been given the green light now. So really, it's all go now in terms of a forest application.
The entire 1.3 billion approved. Is that where we stand
now? The entire 1.3 billion is approved, but the 340 odd million that we heard that was mentioned as the figure is for the next 5 years. The 1.3 billion covers the 20 years of the whole programme. So if you plant a tree today, as a farmer, you'll get 20 years premium, and that will cover that. So that's what the allocation is for.
Okay, so I think that's where maybe the confusion existed.
Yeah, one is for 5 years, the 1.3 billion is for the whole programme.
Okay, and look, the Afforestation scheme obviously is a huge part of this. We've seen very, very poor figures. You know, there was an interim measure. I know there was the de minimis scheme to bridge that gap. But, I mean, the figures are very, very poor, Minister. Like, I suppose our target is 8,000 hectares a year, and we're running currently, I think, you know, well below even for this time last year. I think it was about 1,700 hectares. So, you know, we've a lot of work to do here.
Absolutely, there's a lot of work you're right, there is a lot of work to do, and as you say, that confidence in the sector has been dented over the last number of years. I think what we saw maybe even in the last year is that people knew a new programme would be coming, and there's a sort of a natural tendency to back off and wait and see what the next programme will be. And we've seen that. That's why we announced it. Do you think there's
more to it than that, though? I mean, like that farmers really have lost confidence in planting.
I think there's a challenge, and there has been a challenge with forestry. Maybe with the premiums weren't high enough, you know, to attract farmers in, and now we've them increased between 46 and 66%. So it's a massive increase in the financial supports for farmers. All of this is tax-free, of course, has been for a long time. But confidence is one thing. I think challenge for land is another. You know, there are other land use pressures, particularly from the likes of the dairy sector, and you know, there's a whole issue now there with banding and nitrates and so forth. But just talking to people either here at the ploughing and previous shows like Tullamore Show and different, talking to the people in Teagasc and the forestry companies, there is interest now. I think that the financial supports are making people say, oh, I might have a look at this. Yeah. And the variety of what we're proposing now for farmers, I mean, even the non-licensed 1 hectare native woodland scheme is attractive to farmers. It's not a massive area of land. Yes. It helps us in our figures, but it helps also farmers to maybe take that first step into forestry, because the vast majority of farmers don't have forestry on their farms.
And I think it also deals with maybe that accusation of maybe commercial forestry being a monoculture, you know, and everything like that. But I suppose, Minister, to come back to the point, you know, as I said, people have called for your resignation over this. Michael Healy-Rae's accused you of being asleep at the wheel on this issue. What's your reaction to that?
I just think they're not keeping up with what's happening, or not even trying to understand the processes. I mean, there was criticisms about how long the state aid process was taking, for example, to get the approval. That was really in the lap of the Commission, and we, you know, there was a lot of over and back. The state aid process didn't open till the 1st of January. We were never going to have a programme in place, you know, straight away anyway. I think things are changing. I think attitudes are changing in relation to forestry. I mean, I think we have to rebuild a culture of forestry here in Ireland. I think we've never really had one. I mean, 100 years ago, we only had 1% of forestry, so we certainly haven't got a long culture of forestry here. It's about rebuilding that, but I think we will see that, because we will have generational foresters now going through. We have plantations of 30, 40, 50 years now old. That will carry through, and I'd like to see that part of succession programmes.
But the targets that we have, the 8,000 hectares a year, is that falling far short? I mean, the EPA is saying that we need between 13,000 and 40,000 hectares to offset agricultural emissions by 2050. So is 8,000 really falling short of the mark?
Well, 8,000 is our climate action plan target at the moment. I'd like to see us get to 8,000 and then evaluate if we can go further. I mean, we can set whatever target we want. We still need to engage, particularly with farmers. But would you agree that
it's not good enough to bring us to 2050?
Potentially it's not. But we have to get moving, we have to get the trees in the ground and get that confidence in farmers, in the sector, to move on with that. And I do believe it will come.
Look, confidence is an issue that was dented as well as a result of ash dieback, and obviously that is a horrific disease that has affected plantations and farmers across the country. There is calls for a new compensation scheme. Minister, I think something you might agree has to be done for the farmers who are, you know, impacted by ash dieback. The IFA, who aren't a million miles away from us here, their Forestry Committee Chair, Jason Fleming, has called for a range of measures to help farmers who are impacted by that, including, you know, roadside trees. There's a whole suite of measures, but I think the main thing is a proper new compensation package. What do you have to say to that?
Well, certainly Jason and the IFA team will know full well that that I commissioned an independent analysis, if you like, of the current ash dieback scheme. It was only put in place just before government was formed, so I think it was only right to give it some time to see its take-up and its effectiveness. I think it is clear that it hasn't been effective at supporting farmers to do that. I mean, obviously with rising costs, that's a challenge. And look, I have full sympathy with farmers who have planted ash, as the state asked them to and supported them to, over the last couple of decades. And it is quite depressing to stand in a field of dead ash. It really
is. But sympathy is one thing, Minister.
I know,
the farmers want compensation.
Well, absolutely. But again, the independent review, I'm hoping, will highlight some of the issues. I mean, again, we're constrained a little bit with state aid rules. We can't just do what we want. We can't just pay what we would like to pay. But I know that the group engage with all stakeholders. I'm sure they engage with the IFA and other forest owners, ash owners. And I'm going to sit down with them very soon and just tease out what they found, what the recommendations are, and I would like to come up with some alternative supports for the farmers, but I don't know what they'll look like yet.
Would it be financial supports?
I'm sure there will have to be some support, but again, I'm not going to speak to any of the detail.
Is it too early to include that in the budget, or is this more of a European issue, do you feel?
No, I think it might form part of it. I mean, we're right up against we're only a couple of weeks out from budget.
It's never too late to ask, Minister.
Never too late to ask, no, I agree. But I think we'll have to do something, because it is something we have to clear it. I think we need to be able to move on from ash dieback.
So would you be looking to Michael McGrath to see if there is something available for those farmers?
I'd certainly want to look to supports for the farmers in some way, but what that looks like yet, I don't know.
Okay, just one or two very quick points before we finish, Minister. You mentioned nitrates earlier on. Your party leader, Eamon Ryan, feels that not much is going to change now, given the fact that the European Commission have said that they're not really going to look at this issue again so soon, given the fact that our water quality hasn't really improved. Is Commissioner Sinkevičius coming to Ireland a waste of time, do you feel? What do you make of that? I mean, the Taoiseach has invited him over. Should this have happened months ago, and is there any point in it?
Well, I think, yes, the Taoiseach has invited him. I know my colleague, Minister McConalogue, had previously invited him. I think if Commissioner Sinkevičius were to come to Ireland, what we should be doing is reassuring him and the Commission that Ireland is serious about water quality, that we are going to double our efforts to improve the poor quality, the levels that we have that are below where we should be. I mean, we get all this, we're the second best water quality in Europe, so therefore what, we're fine, we're okay? Well, we're not. We're benchmarked against ourselves. The trends are based on our own water quality. I think everyone accepts that. And I think the common ground here is everyone across society, farmers, you name it, wants better water quality. We have to have it, We've seen the I suppose the catastrophe with Lough Neagh in Northern Ireland at the moment.
Yes.
I mean, that freshwater lake supplies like a quarter of the drinking water to Belfast, I think, or 40%, sorry, it's a significant amount.
It's a very significant water supply,
and it's polluted now with nutrients from all sources. It's not always just farmers, and I accept, people tend to point fingers. It's farmers, it's the local authorities. Yes. It's everyone's interest to get this right.
And beyond 2027, Minister, because we're tight on time, your gut feeling, what's in your heart? Is that 220 gone beyond 2025? Realistically, we are an outlier as things stand, and should we be looking at going down to 170? Do you think it's possible to retain it?
I think if we can turn the water quality around, it's under massive threat. I think everyone would agree with that. We absolutely have to say, now it's going to be reassessed again at the end of 2025. So what have we got? A year and a half, 2 years max to try and show that we can do what we say. I think I have sympathy with the derogation farmers, because the vast majority are doing exactly as they've been asked to do, and the science says if you do A, B and C, then you will not leach nutrients from your farming system and so forth. So it's all of agriculture's interest and society, as I said, to get the water quality right. So I think we really need a doubling down, and this is all about enforcement as well. And we have now invested €60 million in a big water EIP, which is going to be working with farmers, with Dairy Industry Ireland, with LawPro, the local authorities. So it would be nice to get that started as soon as possible and see if we can, affect change in our water quality over the next 2 years. That's what it'll come down to.
Okay, well, Minister of State at the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Green Party Senator Pippa Hackett, thank you so much for joining us in the Agriland Pavilion. Plenty more we could have discussed with the Minister. Time is against us. It's time to go back out onto site now and see what the Agriland team have been getting up to.
We're here with Barry Carey, Crime Prevention Executive with the Irish Farmers Association, and Sergeant Graham Kavanagh, Crime Prevention Officer with Laois and Offaly. Barry, tell us, are crime figures going up?
According to the latest farm crime survey, 55% of those surveyed said they had been a victim of crime in the last 2 years. And that's a significant increase.
And what is the most common crime?
Thefts of tools and machinery, but tractors, trailers and quad bikes are the top 3 items which are on the list of the criminals.
And Sergeant Kavanagh, what can we do to combat this?
So the key to it is to continue to work together the way we have been in the past. I suppose we've come off the back of the last number of years, the society's opened up again, and crime has started to go up in certain pockets, in certain areas. As crime prevention officers on the local guard, we're watching the local crime that's hitting your area, and we'll always use the same advice about reducing the opportunity for the criminal, making it harder for them to steal that property marking, the textile alert, working with your local community alert, your IFA group, and working together we can make, I suppose, our communities a little bit more uncomfortable for the criminal if they do come into it, and reporting it if you see suspicious activity.
And have we seen any trends? You know, Barry saying that there are certain items that are more common.
Yeah, it's the valuable items. I mean, I've seen everything from the trailers, the quads, PTOs, batteries, metal. If the metal prices go up, well, metal will be targeted, and that's the sort of stuff. That's what the criminals looking at, you know. So it's always the same stuff you see. Fuel, when we had increase of energy, fuel will be targeted. So you're looking at that and you say, right, somebody's going to target that. I'm going to, suppose, make it a little bit harder and creating, I suppose, a just secure, hard physical environment for them to get at it.
And is this a key issue for rural communities?
It is, and since the start of the Ukraine war and the embargoes on Russia, agricultural items have become, perhaps GPS trackers, which are a huge tool for farmers in the day-to-day operation, have become a key item for theft as well. And we're all the time advising our members just to think a little bit security, think a little bit who's calling into their yards, what's for sale, and reporting suspicious activities.
And so often rural communities are quite isolated. So is that something that's a concern for you?
I mean, criminal activity can hit in urban areas or rural area, you know, and I suppose with a rural area, if somebody doesn't belong to the area, they stand out a lot easier than the person in an urban centre, you know. So it's come back to that message. If you don't know who they are and you don't like the look of them, you pick up the phone and you ring the guards. Don't wait for somebody else to do it, and don't wait till you hear that something's happened before you report. Because that simple phone call will get a response, and that'll be the deterrent that make that criminal move away, and we can identify them.
And obviously social media is easier to share issues around this. You know, should there be WhatsApp groups? Should people be in part of that?
After a very large episode in North Dublin 5 years ago, we now have over 500 people on 2 WhatsApp groups, and the information sharing is extraordinary, from non-farming, just residents within the rural communities passing information on, and it's a rapid reporting system for the Garda Síochána. We don't make a decision, there's no aspirations on an individual. It's like the confidential number on the side of a car. We pick it up, dial 999-112, not your local Garda station, and get it in there. And let the Gardaí come out and see this is a suspicious activity. But there are certain criminal elements have been spotted, and there have been great convictions in a number of areas due to the communities being the eyes and ears on the ground.
We had a number of instances before Christmas last year. We used text there to inform the public about individuals calling to homes, reporting to me and members of Garda Síochána. And I had 2 individuals that had received the text alerts, and because they got a knock on the door and the person said they were pretending to be a guard, they said, I got the text about you, and closed the door in their face. It stopped the crime happening. Our job is to try and identify these individuals and make them amenable.
And people should never be concerned about calling the Gardaí. We know you're under pressure, resources, that type of thing, but they should always contact.
Report. The more you report, you know, I mean, a crime that's not reported, that potentially makes it easier for the criminal to make another person a victim of crime, you know. Don't ever be embarrassed to report anything, but it's important that you report. Okay. Really important.
Sergeant Kavanagh and Barry Carey, thank you for joining us. We're joined now by Noel Feeney, President of the ACA. Noel, it's been a very difficult year so far.
Francis, how are you doing? I wouldn't say a difficult year, but a very busy year. Most people's years or most business years starts from the 1st of January calendar year. Our year really started this time last year, I suppose, with the introduction of Tranche 1 of the acre scheme and also the open up of the organic scheme. So that's when we would have kicked off with short intervals to draw up plans for clients and farmers, and with those 48,000 applicants for the acre scheme.
And that put your organisation under a lot of pressure, your members?
It did, yeah, but look, we're an organisation with over 250 members countrywide in each county, and we were very adaptable and very flexible and absolutely very proud of the workload we got done. We ended up delivering over 3/4 of the acres plans and up to 1,500, 1,700 organic plans. So that was a huge throughput for the 2.5, 3 months, so we're very proud of that.
Do you think there needed to be a little bit more lead in time, though, on that from the government?
Look, we all wish for lead in time, and it will be desirable, but look, it didn't happen, and we just had to adapt. But look, going forward, we've had a lot of schemes been introduced this year in 2023, and look at again, not much lead in times with the new BIS, CRIS and ECO schemes. Francis, of course, to start off with, closing date was the end of May there. And obviously then we had little schemes thrown in there with a National Ploughing scheme, for example. Also, of course, we had the new Sectoral cow carbon welfare scheme. We had, the beef welfare scheme. So again, all those schemes, there was a lot of work going on there, lots of different closing dates, a lot of different timetables.
And so farmers tell us, that timetable, that tight timetable, is an issue.
It is an issue, and always has been an issue. But look, unfortunately, we don't make the rules and regulations, unfortunately. But look, it is very tight. And look, a lot of farmers now are asking me, God, Noel, what scheme am I in now? Because they can be very, very. They're in so many schemes, and they're going to get so many payments now. When the payments do come out, they'll be getting so much of their BIS scheme, so much of their ECO scheme, etc. Some of them are beginning to lose track of all these different schemes. But look, it is what it is, and but the bottom line is it's income that's badly needed throughout the sector.
Yeah, it puts a lot of pressure on your members, though, to be able to deliver for farmers, isn't it? Because it's a crucial element of their farm finance.
It is indeed. Look, as I say, they're expecting payments from September onwards, and we have to have their applications made. The department have to process the payments. Look, for example, Francis, we had all summer we had to do scoring for the acre scheme on the cooperation areas and the low intensive grasslands. And we got going late. We had to be trained in. There had to be an app developed that we could go out in the field and do the scoring of the wildflowers. And that was very slow taking off. We did lobby for an extension to that. We got an extra month, and I'm delighted to say the numbers are very strong now. We're coming in very strong, right throughout our members, right throughout the country. And again, it's been a huge delivery, with the late starting and with the problems on apps, especially in areas that the reception for mobile phones wasn't great.
And that was a key problem for you, wasn't it?
That was a huge problem, and we had meetings with the acres team in Wexford weekly, and we reported back, and our members reported back individually on the problems. I suppose it was all trial and error, really. But look, we're getting through it. There are still issues, and hopefully for next year, that app can be refined. But look, we are getting through it. The numbers are coming very strong. What have we left? Maybe 8-9 days left at the end of the month. So look, it's looking good. And as I said, the main thing is to get that scoring done, and for the department then to go ahead and process the payments for the farmers.
Yeah. What would help you now in the future, and what would help farmers, do you think?
The main look, more lead in time, as you suggested, more times maybe to deal with a particular scheme, but the IT systems must be in place. The IT systems are so crucial. Every scheme revolves around the IT system.
And so there were teething issues.
Yeah, teething issues. We had teething issues on the BIS ECO scheme as well. But again, once they are up and running and going, we can deliver far quicker and far more efficiently. But look, it was a tough year from that point of view, but great that we are getting through the work. And but look, we've learned. The department have learned. We're in talks with the department continually on how they can be continually refined and improved. So again, hopefully that will pay dividends next year.
Yeah. Would you like to see more formal supports put in place for members of your organisation?
When you say formal supports, we look at talk about maybe training. Again, training is very important. Continual development. Look, we're dealing with the new era. It's all about biodiversity. It's all about water quality, gas emissions, and it's important that we are all updated as well to be, to be able to afford our farmers the up-to-date information. So that's one thing we are working on, and we have a new KT programme coming in place as well. But again, there must be more training for advisors, and that has to be on a continual basis. Has to be.
There is a lot of pressure sometimes on individual advisors, isn't there?
Look, again, difficult. It was a difficult year for farmers and advisors, and there was timelines and deadlines, and it can be quite difficult. But it's an association I'm very proud of, because there's great support within our associations. We have WhatsApp groups, we ring each other, and if someone is getting it, needs a bit of help or needs a bit of advice or finding difficulty with understanding schemes, there's loads of people there, and it's been fantastic to see what people can do to help each other within the organisation, and that's a huge benefit of being a member of the association. You have backup, and I'd advise any advisors that's working out there on their own that's not members of our association that they should become members of the ACA, because again, it's a great community to work in, and the backup is superb.
Noel Feeney, President of the ACA, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Francis. Thank you.
Now on the stage here in the Agriland Pavilion at the National Ploughing Championships, we have a panel focused on the tillage sector for you, and of course the tillage sector very closely linked with, of course, the National Ploughing Championships as well. Joining me here on stage is Kieran McAvoy, the IFA National Tillage Committee Chair. We also have Shay Phelan, who is the tillage specialist with Teagasc, and Richard Halloran, Agriland journalist, who of course will be very familiar to our Agriland readers as well, producing great content and great opinion pieces on a weekly basis to spark some debate, no doubt, around the country. But I'm going to start with yourself, Shay, firstly. I suppose from Teagasc data, how bad a year has 2023 been for the tillage sector? We've seen photos of crops really suffering out there. It's been very difficult weather-wise. We've high costs against the back of it, and it has been a tough year. 2022 is a distant memory, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's been probably one of the toughest years that I can remember. Normally we would do a harvest report every year, and normally we would see that total production of cereals would be somewhere in the region of about 2.2, 2.3, even 2.4 million tonnes. We're guessing this year, not guessing, we're kind of estimating this year that's going to be somewhere south of 2 million tonnes, so it's probably going to be maybe 1.9 million tonnes, somewhere in that sort of ballpark. So if you think of that, that's nearly 500,000 tonnes of grain less in the country. And that's only part of the story. I mean, the other part of the story has been the costs, as you say, in terms of growing those crops, which have been significantly higher this year and last year than it would have been. But last year we were compensated by high prices and good yields. So I suppose in terms of where crops are and tillage farmers are at the moment, it certainly is one of the most difficult years that we've ever had. And throwing the weather on top of that, come harvest time and so on and so forth, the costs around that. So I think this year is definitely going to leave tillage farmers in a tough place in a lot of cases. A lot of crops are not going to wash their face, unfortunately, and they're going to be left with bills rather than what they're going to make from some crops. And I think that's the reality of it. And it can be kind of scary on a lot of farms that some farms suffered worse than others. So it's a very individual situation on a lot of farms. But nonetheless, I think the whole industry as a whole has suffered a lot this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And is that across all crops, do you feel, Shay? Is there particular standout crops that have suffered more than others? Or is it, as you say, dependent on the location of the farm?
Yeah, it really is dependent on location. Now, some crops, certainly in this area, we would have been able to sow, say, malt and barley in February and early March. And some of those crops, thankfully, did quite well, passed for malting. So they were quite good. But then you have other guys and other farms where they didn't get into sowing barley until May even. And some of those crops are awful, to be perfectly honest with you. Maybe less than 2 tonnes to the hectare or 2 tonnes to the acre. So again, they're very, very poor. And when you take in the price that they're getting for the grain and the straw, lack of straw as well. So the overall income on those fields has been quite poor. I suppose if I was to look at anything that was probably doing well, some bean crops are doing quite well, and I suppose the support that's there in terms of the protein payment is going to help those growers. as is the Strong Corporation Scheme, which is a huge success this year. A lot of people took the advantage of using that straw chopping scheme, and that will certainly help incomes. But the crops themselves have been very, very poor.
And before I bring Kieran in, like in terms of harvest 2023, are we complete now? Almost complete? Is it a long way off for some?
Myself and Kieran were just talking about this earlier on. I was in Wexford last weekend. There's still spring barley to be cut down there. Spring beans still have to be cut. And again in the northeast and the northwest, still barley and protein crops to be cut as well. So probably somewhere in the region about 5, maybe 6%, but that varies from region to region or from area to area. But there's still that amount out there. You know?
And as the year goes on, then you wonder about quality as well.
What's going to be brought in? There's still quite a lot of straw on the ground as well, which hasn't been gathered up as well. I know that's driving into the feeding into the straw market as well, where straw is now very, very scarce on a lot of farms, and a lot of tillage farmers are getting phone calls looking for straw and they simply don't have it.
Look, Kieran, I want to bring you in here because I think Shay has really laid bare the challenges that are facing the tillage sector. And, you know, the draft interim report of the Food Vision Tillage Group, we got sight of it here in Agriland. You're part of that group. It's chaired by Matt Dempsey. I mean, that group has been asked to produce a report to sustainably grow the sector by 400,000 hectares by the end of this decade. There's 20 recommendations in that report at the moment. Do they provide the answers for the tillage sector? Because 400,000 hectares by the end of this decade is a huge ask.
Well, look, I suppose, Aisling, I suppose I'll start by saying that a lot of farm organisations and the whole industry were involved in that Food Vision 2030 group. And look, I see that as a pathway long-term for the tillage industry and to get the tillage industry to grow. But I mean, in the short term, it's going to be an uphill battle to retain the acreage we have. It's going to be an uphill battle to try and get the farmers that stay here, myself included, to survive this year. And I mean, the reality is, tillage farmers are in trouble, and this is a major problem this year. There's no hiding that. So look, of the 20 measures that's there at the moment, there's none of them a silver bullet for this harvest. That's been honest. It's a plan for the future, and to get the acreage up. But I think the biggest problem is what acreage are we going to lose, and what farmers we're going to lose out of Harvest 23.
So is Budget 2024, could that provide a silver bullet for tillage farmers?
We would hope so.
Are you asking Charlie McConalogue to get on to his colleague Michael McGrath and find some money for this sector?
Yes, we would be. We would be seeking a meeting with the Minister. We had a National Grain Committee meeting in IFA last Friday, and we got a fairly up-to-date picture of the whole country. And I mean, the first time I've ever gone to a meeting in September that there's not some part of the country fully finished harvest. Yeah. You know, maybe northeast or even a little bit north of here, in Toffley and places, there'd be bits and pieces, but practically every county had something left to harvest. And I mean, that's the last bit that's in the field, is the last bit to maybe pay a bill or pay for a machine. So yeah, there is a real problem there, yeah.
Richard, I'm going to bring you in here because, you know, looking at that figure of growing the tillage area by 400,000 hectares by the end of this decade, we're now coming off the back of the news about the nitrates derogation being cut. The pressure on the land market already, we see the prices that are being paid for land, you know, and rental land as well is astronomical, and the pressure from the dairy sector is only going to continue. Where do you see this going?
Well, I think the reality for me is that you don't need to be Albert Einstein to work out that tillage is facing into a perfect storm, both in bringing some hope to the picture, to the situation, lead to the door of the Farm Minister. There will be significant pressure brought on the Minister to come up with some form of compensation scheme to get farmers over the hump that is 2022, 2023. The guys have outlined in some, the
he does
issues
have
that are out there.
$7.5 million from the EU Commission. We're still waiting to hear how the department, but $7.5 million won't go far if it's split how many ways, you know.
But I think the bigger picture is how do tillage farmers themselves perceive themselves as being, and there is more than a feeling out there that they're second-class citizens within Irish agriculture, and I think that's a fundamental reality that the tillage vision group.
To the dairy sector?
Well, if you go back into the history of the dairy sector, when quotas were brought to an end, they were given every encouragement to push forward, to grow their businesses, to bring in new entrants. We have never seen that for tillage, certainly in my lifetime.
Yeah. Well, I suppose what's the saying? Buy land, they're not making any more of it. So there's only a finite amount of land out there as well.
Truly,
look, I mean, Kieran, coming back to that Food Vision tillage report as well, and I know it's only an interim report that we're looking at, taxation measures, and the budget is just around the corner. How could taxation measures help out the tillage sector, do you feel?
Well, look, the way that the Food Vision group worked was we tried to include any possibilities, and look, there's going to be a focus group on taxation to see is there any tax incentives that we can bring to bear to help tillage farmers, both on the land rental and maybe on other issues. So maybe on investment, I don't know. So it's a very open book on the taxation.
Yeah, absolutely. And an interesting recommendation as well, Shane, it kind of comes back to the